Chapter 1465. Many devils in the surroundings applauded one after another, especially since they were born with a tyrannical nature. So, they couldn't help but get excited when they saw blood and death. In particular, these human warriors had fallen into their hands as slaves. There wasn't the slightest change on the faces of these human warriors when they saw their companions being beaten to death. It seemed as if they were numb to it. Every day, every moment, there were people who couldn't bear the torture of the devil race and died. They had seen this kind of thing many times, so they were numb to it and didn't feel anything. In fact, they were just a pile of walking corpses now, so they didn't have many thoughts. Yi Shiwen's eyes were bloodshot. He clenched his fists tightly, and his nails had sunk deep into his flesh. Aren't these lowly human slaves mining in the nearby mines? Why did they bring them here at this time? Letting them walk in our city is polluting our city. They are only fit to be associated with pigs and dogs. I don't know. Letting them walk in the city is their honor. Hey, you don't know, but I do. It's useless for you to scold them. They are already walking corpses, and most importantly, they're going to die soon. At this time, an Azura sneered and said, "Going to die? What's going on?" This Azura's words suddenly attracted the attention of many people. Yi Shiwen was also among them. Isn't there a human warrior who has been harassing us recently? Now he has angered our city lord. So, our city lord wants to execute all these human slaves. That Azura sneered and said, "Now, our city lord has arranged an inescapable net. When the time comes, we will execute these human slaves in batches. Let's see whether the human warrior will appear or not. If he appears, then he will die. If he doesn't appear, then these human slaves will be executed in batches. Let's see if he can still endure when he sees his compatriots being killed one by one." So, it's like this. It's really a good plan, but aren't they afraid that you will find out? What's there to be afraid of? This is an overt plot in itself. Besides, it's just a bunch of human slaves. They're not worth anything. If they die, then so be it, the Azura said indifferently. In the demon realm, although the number of human slaves was the least among the various slaves, they were actually not worth much. Apart from the fact that they were free labor, they did not have much value. Besides, if he doesn't show up, then we will spread this news to the human race. Now, we already know his name. He is Yi Shiwen. If I'm not mistaken, then he should be a tyrant of the human race. He is a descendant of the Yi family. Moreover, he should be a Heaven's Pride expert. Do you think that Yi Shiwen will still have a foothold in the human race after we spread this news? Didn't humans love infighting the most? When that time comes, he will be in trouble. Therefore, regardless of whether this plan succeeds or not, it will be effective. That's enough, the Azura added with a sneer. What a sinister plan. Yi Shiwen clenched his fist and said, if this plan was really successful, then it would inevitably be a series of twists and turns. There were a lot of people in the Yi family who didn't like him. It would be fine if they didn't have a handle on him. However, if they had a handle on him, then they would be able to make a big movement. There were a lot of hot-blooded people who hated the devil race. If they knew that Yi Shiwen didn't save them, then even if they knew that it was impossible to save them in the demon realm, it would still be enough to cause a lot of criticism. At that time, it would be inevitable that there would be a series of twists and turns. In addition, some people would add fuel to the fire. At that time, Yi Shiwen's reputation would not be good. Even if a rational person knew that it was impossible to save those people, but the irrational people still occupied the majority. Therefore, this problem was simply a hot potato. Many of the major forces of the human race had fallen into the hands of the devil race. However, none of them proposed to save them. It wasn't that they were unwilling, but they couldn't. If they could do it, then they would have done it long ago. Why would they wait until now? This was an extremely troublesome matter. Haha, if that's the case, then it will be interesting. Although I have heard of this human boy, I have been here for several months. However, I have never seen him even once. I'm afraid this time, I have a chance. That's right. I also want to know what kind of human he is. He can actually cause chaos in my race. Many devils had expressed that they must see this human warrior. However, they didn't know that the human warrior they wanted to see was actually right beside them. Yi Shiwen narrowed his eyes. This scheme was truly sinister. If it had been any other scheme, then perhaps Yi Shiwen would have remained indifferent. However, there were always some things that he couldn't tolerate. He calmed his breath and told himself, "Calm down, I must calm down. At this time, if I was provoked and made a move, it was very likely that I would lose my life here. Even if the devil race spread the news to the Yi family, it would not be a big deal. At most, some people would condemn me. Although there would be some twists and turns, it would eventually calm down. Compared to the consequences of making a move, it was still much better." These human slaves were directly escorted outside the city. At this time, many devils followed them out. They had also heard about this matter and went outside the city to watch. They had already known about this matter and were waiting for the possible arrival of Yi Shiwen. However, they weren't stopped. Perhaps they didn't want to stop it at all. They blocked the news. In fact, they couldn't wait for the bigger the commotion, the more likely it was to attract Yi Shiwen's arrival. Now, many people believed that there were spies in the city who were in contact with Yi Shiwen. Therefore, they made such a big fuss in order to let the so-called spies in the city tell the news to Yi Shiwen, and then attract Yi Shiwen to take action. This was the real ultimate goal. However, this was an overt plot. He publicized this strategy to the public. It didn't matter whether you knew or not. Yi Shiwen didn't follow them out. He was afraid that he couldn't help but attack. He could maintain absolute calmness in most cases, but that didn't mean that it was absolute. Soon, cheers and mockery of devils came from outside the city. Then, a burst of blood light soared into the sky. Several blood energies soared into the sky, accompanied by a shocking resentment. Yi Shiwen clenched his fists in anger, and his hands were trembling. He knew that a group of human slaves had been directly executed, and these human slaves' resentment had been released before their death. They were the pride of the human race, but now they had fallen into such a fate. The resentment that had been suppressed in their hearts had been directly released before their death, and had directly materialized on the spot. In ancient battlefields, it was easy to form such a dead land. It was because after tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands, or even hundreds of thousands of resentful souls died full of resentment, their resentment directly covered the world, isolating the yin and yang of the world. Many resentful souls that had dissipated in the world remained, and even evolved into malicious spirits. Of course, the premise was that there was no one to deal with it. In a place like the Yi family's Devil Passage, although a large number of masters died full of resentment at every moment, there were countless masters sitting here. Even if a malicious spirit really evolved into a malicious spirit, it could only be directly killed by them. After this group of slaves was executed, about an hour later, there was another burst of cheers outside the city, and a few resentments soared into the sky. "Don't force me to attack." Yi Shiwen gritted his teeth, clenched his fists, and said. His nails had deeply sunk into his flesh, and blood flowed out. With the degree of his tyrant body, it was unexpectedly scratched. It could be seen how angry Yi Shiwen was. After another hour, there was another burst of cheers outside the city. At this time, almost all the devils in the city, big and small, went out to watch and shouted excitedly. The hundreds of thousands of devils in the city began to go crazy, like a crazy man and woman in a carnival party. At this time, Yi Shiwen also went out because at this time, almost all the devils in the city went out to watch. If only he was inside, it would be too conspicuous. When he went out, the entire execution ground by the moat was surrounded by 3 layers of people inside and 3 layers of people outside. Fortunately, although everyone could not see, they could use divine thoughts to see the situation inside the execution ground. Yi Shiwen's divine thoughts naturally swept out, and he saw that the entire execution ground was full of ordinary Ashura clan soldiers. In addition to the ordinary soldiers of the Ashura tribe, there were also many slaves of the human tribe standing beside them expressionlessly. In the middle of the field, there were several human tribe slaves kneeling. Behind them, there were several executioners of the Ashura tribe who were preparing to carry out the execution. The scene was filled with a bloody smell, and there were no corpses. The executed human clan slaves were directly thrown into the moat on the spot. This moat was not an ordinary river, but a very strong corrosive moat. Even if a devil expert fell into it, he would be directly corroded into bones in a very short time. There was no possibility of survival at all. Soon it was time for the execution. There was some commotion among the few human clan slaves who were about to be executed, but they were quickly suppressed by the Azura clan executioners. "Time's up. Execute. Do it." Suddenly, a team leader of the Ashura tribe said. Then, the executioners of the Ashura tribe were ready to carry out the execution. Chapter 1466. Time's up. Let's start the execution. Suddenly, a captain of the Azura clan opened his mouth and said. Then, several executioners of the Azura clan prepared to carry out the execution. The executioners of the Azura clan raised their hands and were about to chop down with their broadswords. Whoosh! An earth-shattering sword chi instantly pierced through the vast sky. Those devils who were originally watching but were blocked in the path of this sword chi were directly bombarded. Puff! 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 Wherever this sword chi passed, it directly set off a bloody storm. These devils who were directly bombarded by the sword chi screamed on the spot. Then, they were bombarded and turned into a mass of blood mist which was absorbed by a mass of blood light. This sword chi directly bombarded from the back of the devils to the execution ground like a hot knife through butter. It directly cleared a huge empty area which was filled with a bloody storm. After directly clearing a path, this sword chi directly slashed towards those executioners. Bang! 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 Those executioners were also bombarded by the sword chi in an instant and exploded on the spot one after another. All of this took a long time to describe, but in fact it only happened in an instant. Almost in an instant, the situation on the field changed dramatically. Many devil experts finally reacted after those executioners were directly bombarded to death. Someone attacked the execution ground. However, more experts suddenly became excited because they finally realized that someone would attack the execution ground at this time to save people. Who else could it be other than their target this time, Yi Shiwen? Many of them had been here for a long time, but Yi Shiwen always appeared and disappeared mysteriously. They had only heard of his name, but had never seen him in person. As for those human slaves who were executed, in their opinion, it was not a big deal at all. It was just an excuse to attract Yi Shiwen to come out. As long as Yi Shiwen came out, then these people would not really care about him at all. In an instant, all kinds of divine thoughts were flying all over the place, sweeping across the world. Soon, they saw a man in a green robe appear in the sky. He slowly walked over, and each step seemed to have a rhythm. Every step directly stepped on the hearts of the crowd. Every step he took seemed to be able to trigger a special frequency, causing everyone's hearts to completely stop beating. His body exuded a frightening aura of hostility, as if he was an Azura coming to kill. His terrifying spiritual power crushed everyone present. Hundreds of thousands of fiend race experts present were actually completely suppressed by his aura alone. I said, "Don't force me to make a move." The entire execution ground was silent. Everyone seemed to be stunned. Bastard, a human half-step into the late stage of the heaven tier dares to be so arrogant. Suddenly, a devil race expert was the first to wake up from the shock of Yi Shiwen's appearance. He immediately roared angrily. He was an expert in the heaven realm. At this time, he was simply ashamed and annoyed. He had never thought that he, a dignified expert in the heaven realm, would actually be frightened by a human warrior who was half a step in the heaven realm. This was simply a great humiliation. Although he had long heard rumors about Yi Shiwen, rumors were just rumors. He refused to believe it no matter what. Kill him. Tear him into pieces. I'm going to eat him alive. Suddenly, after the first one, the other devils reacted one after another. They all cursed loudly to vent the feelings of shame and annoyance in their hearts. They were actually frightened by a human warrior. Hundreds of thousands of devils cursed loudly. The voices were so loud that it seemed to drown all the sounds in this world. The sound waves formed were stronger and stronger, like stormy waves, beating the world. But at this time, hundreds of thousands of devils didn't step forward to kill Yi Shiwen. Perhaps they were frightened by Yi Shiwen's action of using his sword chi to clear a path, Or perhaps they all felt that Yi Shiwen was going to die anyway, so they didn't need to do it themselves. Everyone knew that the Azura City Lord had set up an inescapable net here. Many people guessed that he wouldn't come at all. After all, if he had obtained this information and still came, then he would be too stupid. At the very least, in their devil race, he would be an idiot. Only a fool would choose to come here if his head was caught in a door. But at the same time, they hoped that Yi Shiwen would come, which formed a very contradictory mentality. They were looking forward to Yi Shiwen's coming, and at the same time, they felt that he would not come at all. In many people's view, the execution of human slaves was just a means to make them a little happy. Yi Shiwen's pace seemed slow, but it was actually very fast. Almost in an instant, he had already rushed to the center of the execution ground. Those executioners were not a match for Yi Shiwen at all, and had already been directly strangled by his sword chi. And at the moment when Yi Shiwen appeared in the center of the execution ground, a huge blood-colored array suddenly appeared in the sky, completely enveloping the entire place. Rumble! The entire array was operating according to a certain natural law. Suddenly, Yi Shiwen could feel that the blood of those human slaves who had been executed before, as well as those devils who had been killed by him before, began to slowly boil, and began to replenish the entire array little by little. The entire array was exuding endless coercion, and it fell on Yi Shiwen's body fiercely, as if it wanted to crush his whole body. He came. Such a thought suddenly emerged in everyone's mind. Yi Shiwen, I didn't expect that you would still come. I really don't know whether to say that the so-called feelings of you humans are good, or should I say that you are stupid? At this time, a slightly playful voice came from the sky. Then a figure appeared in front of everyone. It was no other person, but the previous Azura City Lord. Compared with the previous period of depression, at this time, the Azura City Lord was full of joy. Finally, he was going to get rid of this big trouble. It could be considered as getting rid of a big trouble. This kind of mood was simply unimaginably good. This is the human boy who has been giving you such a headache for so long. He is just a human at the late stage of half-step celestial realm. How difficult can it be to deal with him? I really don't know whether you are a waste or not. At this time, another rude voice came, but it was a tall, great demon who appeared in front of everyone. Isn't this the city lord of the nearby Great Demon City? Why, even he is here. At this time, someone recognized the origin of this great demon. He flapped his extremely black wings behind him and looked quite disdainful. This disdain was towards Yi Shiwen, who was only at the late stage of half-step celestial realm. At the same time, it was also disdain towards the Azura City Lord. Even a kid at the late stage of half-step celestial realm could force him into a desperate situation. He was too much of a failure. Between the 8 royal demon clans, it could even be said that each of them had a blood feud with each other. In fact, it was not smaller than the feud with the various clans in the ancient Barrens continent. The rise of the 8 royal demon clans was accompanied by a bloody expedition against the other clans. Therefore, how could there not be a blood feud? Although they were still considered united in front of the various clans in the ancient Barrens continent, they still had their own dirty dealings with each other. The Azura City Lord only snorted coldly and did not speak. Firstly, it was indeed embarrassing to be forced to this extent by a human martial artist at the late stage of half-step celestial realm. Secondly, he kept sneering. An ordinary late stage of half-step celestial realm? We'll talk about it after you've suffered from him. Who cares about him? As long as he abides by the agreement and gives us half of the income of this city, this matter will be over. Suddenly, another powerful figure appeared in the void. It was a terrifying expert from the original demon clan. His strength was not inferior to the Azura City Master and the Great Fiend Demon City Master in the slightest. Someone recognized this expert. He was also a city lord nearby, but he was the city lord of a city controlled by the original demon clan. Many people were even more shocked. They did not expect that in order to eliminate Yi Shiwen, the Azura City Lord would make such a huge sacrifice. After reaching the 4th level of the celestial realm, no matter if it was the experts of the ancient Barrens continent or the demon domain, they would try their best to suppress a region. It was not because of how noble they were or how free they were. For the experts of the heaven tier, They were only one step away from the legendary undying. However, this step would eliminate 99% of the elites. Every minute and every second of their time was precious, so how could they waste it here? The fundamental reason why they were willing to leave a region was for resources and income. If they wanted to improve further, no one could do without all kinds of resources. However, if it wasn't for the geniuses nurtured by the clan, they would not be able to obtain sufficient cultivation resources. Hence, the only way was to choose a region to leave the region. From there, they would be able to take a cut of the income of the city. This was the most fundamental reason why they could continue cultivating and improve further. For any expert who had reached this level, it was an existence akin to their lifeblood. Now, the Azure City Lord actually wanted to give half of the income to the Great Demon City Lord and the original Demon City Lord. This was equivalent to reducing his future development. It was enough to show how much he hated Yi Shiwen. In the past year, what kind of trouble did Yi Shiwen cause him that forced him to do this? Don't worry. As long as you can eliminate this human brat, you will definitely get the benefits that I promised you. At this time, the Azure City Lord said while gritting his teeth. The eyes that looked at Yi Shiwen were filled with killing intent. If it wasn't for Yi Shiwen, he would not have needed to pay such a huge price. Hence, today he would definitely die. With 3 experts at the 4th level of the Celestial Realm, with Yi Shiwen's cultivation, he would not be able to escape even if he had wings. Chapter 1467. In order to lure Yi Shiwen into the trap, this Azure City Lord could be said to have exhausted all the chips he could use. If this continued, he would be dragged down by Yi Shiwen sooner or later. Instead of that, it was better to fight to the death and keep Yi Shiwen here so they still had hope. Yi Shiwen didn't say anything, just silently put these human slaves in the Celestial Realm one by one. These were all heroes who had once fought for the human race, and now they had ended up like this. He let out a long sigh. Perhaps he couldn't save everyone, but at least, now that they were right in front of him, he would save those he could save. When these humans were saved by him, there was a slight trace of intelligence in their eyes, and then they returned to a deathly still look. He saved these people one by one, and none of the demon race present came out to stop him. They just stared blankly at this extremely daring human race. Even the 3 Celestial Realm 4th level demon race city lords in the sky didn't move, just looking at Yi Shiwen with a sneer. When Yi Shiwen rescued the last person, he discovered that it was an old woman. However, Yi Shiwen could see that she wasn't very old, but she was extremely old. Her martial power and blood essence had been sucked dry by someone. Yi Shiwen's hand touched her body, and suddenly, a loud bang sounded. That old woman directly exploded on the spot, forming a sky full of blood rain. This was also a former Celestial Realm master, and she exploded on the spot, especially in front of Yi Shiwen. The power was so great, it was simply unimaginable. A big hole with a radius of 100 meters was blasted out of the ground. As the smoke and dust dispersed, Yi Shiwen could be seen in the center like a bloody man, not moving at all. His skin and flesh were lacerated, and he was completely defenseless. Even if he was the tyrant body, he was still injured by the self-detonation of such a Heaven Realm expert at close range. Blood flowed down, and it was not clear whether it was his or that woman's. His hand still stayed in the air, as if the face of that old woman was still in front of him. Rumble! The entire Tianyuan mirror was filled with a huge explosion, and all the people who had been saved by Yi Shiwen just now exploded. Why isn't he moving? Was he killed by the explosion? I don't think so. He might have been scared silly. Ha ha ha. Is he stupid? Does he really think he can save her? These human slaves have all been cursed with blood curses since long ago, but their master can detonate them with a single thought. They don't even know this. What an idiot. The devil experts in the surroundings were full of ridicule. It seemed as if they were laughing at Yi Shiwen for overestimating his capabilities. They had exhausted all means in order to prevent these former powerhouses of the human race from escaping. Therefore, those human slaves had already become numb because their lives were in the hands of others, and they had no control over it at all. These words pierced Yi Shiwen's ears. Ha ha ha, Yi Shiwen. Aren't you very angry? Unfortunately, You want to be a good person, but you ended up sacrificing their lives in vain. They didn't need to die. I spent a lot of money to buy these human slaves, but now they have all died because of you." The Azura City Lord saw that Yi Shiwen was in a daze and didn't move at all, and immediately burst into laughter. He was extremely carefree. The grievances he had suffered for more than a year could be said to have been resolved in one move. As the saying goes, I don't kill people, but people die because of me. He died because of you. He died because of you. He died because of you. This sentence constantly lingered in Yi Shiwen's mind, as if a sharp sword had pierced through something in an instant. He had never been like this time, as if his faith had been pierced in an instant. I don't kill people, but people die because of me. When he really stood in front of these human slaves, the only thing he could feel was despair. He had no interest in living and lived in a muddle-headed manner. Unless he died of exhaustion, he couldn't even commit suicide after being cursed by the blood curse. He was like a walking corpse, mining mines for the devil race. 2 lines of turbid tears flowed down, a little salty taste. How many years had it been? How many years had it been since he felt the taste of tears? After coming to this world, he only had iron and blood left. Things like tears seemed to have gone extinct. But now, they flowed down unconsciously. She is smiling, she is smiling. She is really smiling. The corner of Yi Shiwen's mouth flashed with a trace of a strange smile. He didn't feel the slightest bit of vitality when he was standing in front of that old woman. There was only a heavy, deathly stillness. However, he felt a smile at the moment when she exploded. There was no resentment, only relief. Yes, a kind of relief. Traces of true essence began to revolve around his body, gradually forming a huge cyclone around him. Slowly, it turned into a storm that soared into the sky. The aura on his body was released without reservation, and the terrifying aura belonging to the half-step celestial realm instantly suppressed the audience. The devil race present was suppressed by this terrifying aura, unable to say a word, as if a heavy mountain was pressing down on their hearts. Even the great Demon City Lord and the original Demon City Lord, at this time, showed a look of shock on their faces. At this time, they really realized something. The Azura City Lord was forced to this point by Yi Shiwen, and even had to choose to give up half of the benefits in exchange for killing him. It was not without any reason. In front of them, was this really a half-step celestial realm warrior? Many people were shocked, especially many celestial realm masters. If a half-step celestial realm warrior had this kind of strength, then they, the celestial realm masters, should just die. Kill. We must kill. At this time, the eyes of the great Demon City Lord and the original Demon City Lord flickered with a strong, murderous intent. It was even more intense and terrifying than the Azura City Lord. They had all heard that the reason the Azura City Lord had fallen to such a state was because he had ambushed Yi Shiwen. From this, it could be seen that he was a vengeful person. If they allowed such a person to grow, would there still be room for them to survive in the future? However, before they could make the first move, the endless retribution clouds in the sky began to condense. The oppressive aura made the faces of the surrounding demons change drastically. They were born much stronger than many humans. Some of them were even born in the transcendent realm, and some were even in the law manifestation realm. However, because they were born from the most and evil demonic chi in the world, they were born with the power of heaven's retribution's lightning retribution. If the human race master's retribution was said to be 9 out of 10, then the demon race master's retribution was truly 1 out of 100. Out of 100 people, there might not even be one who could successfully overcome heaven's retribution. Perhaps this was the balance of the world. But no matter what, for any demon race, heaven's retribution was an abnormal nightmare. Every heaven's retribution was a terrifying threat to them. They might be struck to death by the lightning retribution at any time. For them, it was undoubtedly fresh in their memories, especially those demon race masters who had entered the celestial realm. Their faces were even paler. They instantly felt that this was a celestial realm, heaven's retribution. Looking at Yi Shiwen in the middle of the retribution clouds, it looked like he was about to undergo retribution. Everyone's first reaction was to escape from where the retribution clouds were. However, it was already too late. They were already locked on by a powerful heavenly might. Damn, we aren't helping this kid to overcome retribution. Many devils cursed out loud. They had simply encountered an undeserved calamity. They were just here to be bystanders and watch that audacious human brat. How the F***CK did they encounter a tribulation? F***CK. This kid is crazy. He pulled us all in. Even if we die, the power of the heavens' retribution will increase by several times. Someone wailed. The heavens' retribution was naturally a double-edged sword. For them, this was a death retribution. However, for Yi Shiwen, wasn't it the same? It was also a situation where there was no chance of survival. But if Yi Shiwen could hear it at this time, he would definitely wail 100 times more than this person. Although he had used the heavens' retribution to kill his enemies before, in all honesty, he really didn't do it on purpose this time. There were hundreds of thousands of demons in the city here. If they were all recognized by the heavens' retribution as helping him to overcome retribution, then his retribution would be terrifying to an unimaginable degree. For him, there was still a glimmer of hope for him to survive the heavens' retribution. However, after such a powerful upgrade, it was completely a situation where there was no chance of survival. So, watch your sister. Watch your sister's soy sauce. This time, his heaven's retribution was purely condensed naturally. It wasn't like the previous heaven's retribution that he had deliberately condensed. That sentence had greatly stimulated him. However, it didn't destroy him. It seemed as if it had shattered his faith. He used to think that he was right, but it might not necessarily be right. This made him seriously doubt his own Tao. The higher the cultivation of a person, the more convinced he was that his Tao was invincible. However, at the same time, the more determined a person was, once he doubted his own Tao, the result would be a complete collapse. It was normal for an ordinary person to go against their original beliefs. However, for a warrior, this was a death retribution. Those human slaves had exploded too suddenly. He had been caught off guard. It had suddenly broken through the defense in Yi Shiwen's heart. In addition, the death of a large number of slaves had stimulated his mind. Otherwise, with his firm faith, it would have been absolutely impossible for him to be shaken by such words. And just when his faith was about to collapse, he suddenly felt the kindness of that old woman. She didn't have the slightest bit of resentment because of his death. On the contrary, she only felt relief. This made him wake up in an instant. Death was not necessarily a bad thing. Most importantly, he had directly comprehended the impermanence of the heavens' way through this matter. Only the heart would last forever. His cultivation had soared rapidly. Some of the principles that he hadn't understood before had suddenly been thoroughly comprehended. It was just like the legendary ascending to heaven in a single day. This directly led to the arrival of the heavens' retribution. Moreover, it also conveniently remembered the hundreds of thousands of onlookers of the devil race. At this time, he only wanted to say one sentence in his heart, F***CK. Chapter 1468. Although he was wailing in his heart, there was no change in his expression. That was because he knew that there was nothing for him to worry about. Worrying was useless. He could only fight with all his might for a chance of survival. Moreover, although the heavenly tribulation came suddenly, hadn't he been preparing for this for the past 2 years, or even the past 10 years? It couldn't be said that he hadn't prepared at all. It wasn't that he didn't have any confidence. At this time, the Azura City Lord and the other 2 experts at the 4th level of the Sky Realm were also shocked because they knew very well how terrifying the heavenly tribulation was. How terrifying would it be to be involved in the heavenly tribulation? Only an idiot would rush into the heavenly tribulation to kill the person who was going through the tribulation. The best way was to choose after the person had passed the tribulation and then take advantage of the moment when they were at their weakest. That was the best way. As long as one was human, they would know how to choose. However, they were pulled into the tribulation at this time. It could be said that it was an undeserved disaster. Rumble, rumble, rumble. The sound of thunder resounded throughout the world. Endless thunder clouds began to gather, and lightning dragons surged within them. That kind of heavenly might was vast and mighty. It went straight to one's heart. No matter what kind of species or what kind of expert, they were all people of the heavens. Under the mighty heavenly might, there was no difference. It was just that the stronger the martial artist would be less afraid. Although martial artists were known to do things that went against the heavens and fought against the heavens, in reality, there were very few who actually dared to go against the heavens. That was because those who dared to go against the heavens were all struck to death by the heavenly tribulation. The so-called going against the heavens was just tormenting within the framework given by the heavens. No matter how heaven-defying it seemed, there was a reason behind it. It was impossible for something that was illogical to appear. Towards the heavens, no matter what kind of martial artist it was, they all had great fear. Regardless of whether they were righteous or evil martial artists, they were all the same. It was very normal for them to tremble under the heavenly might, especially for creatures like the demon race. They were completely restrained by the lightning tribulation. They couldn't be compared to them at all. Rumble, countless lightning bolts instantly struck down. They were like lightning dragons descending from the sky, as if they wanted to devour everything. Ah, ah, ah. A series of screams rose and fell. Many people did not even have time to react before they were killed by the thunder tribulation, especially those demons at the early stage of the law phase realm. Many of them came to watch the show and were not prepared at all. Moreover, this was a heaven tribulation of the celestial being realm. Its power was unimaginable. In addition, they were restrained by the lightning tribulation. Before they could even react, they were already struck to death. Even those demons at the 7th, 8th, and 9th level of the law phase realm were heavily injured in an instant. Only those martial artists at the half-step heaven realm and above were still struggling. The thunder and lightning were like a rainstorm, instantly engulfing the entire execution ground. Even the entire city was wrapped in it, and the heavenly tribulation became even more terrifying. Countless electric dragons fell from the sky and rushed to bombard Yi Shiwen's body. His body emitted a wisp of green smoke. If an ordinary person had been in his place, he would have already been bombarded to death. Compared to the lightning dragons that Yi Shiwen had to endure, the heavenly tribulations of others simply weren't on the same level. In his body, the bronze-colored tyrant body and the golden divinity were constantly intertwining. These divinities had gradually integrated into his body and completely integrated into one. If it was during normal times, he might still absorb the power of these heavenly tribulations to temper his tyrant body scripture. But at this time, he didn't dare to do so. The heavenly tribulation was much more violent than he had imagined. Go kill him. Otherwise, none of us will live today. Kill him, and the heavenly tribulation will stop. At this time, the Azura City Lord shouted while resisting the heavenly tribulation. The other two Demon Clan City Lords also reacted. Indeed, this was the heavenly tribulation that Yi Shiwen had triggered. As long as he was killed, the entire heavenly tribulation would disappear. Originally, they weren't too panicked. So what if the heavenly tribulation of Celestial Realm was launched? After all, it was only used to test half-step Celestial Realm warriors. They weren't ordinary Celestial Realm warriors, but experts of the Celestial Realm middle stage who had already entered the 4th level of Celestial Realm. There was no need to be afraid at all. Even if they were targeted by the heavenly tribulation, it wouldn't be a big deal. It wasn't until now that they realized how wrong they were. They were too naive at that time. Yi Shiwen's heaven's retribution was simply going to destroy the world. Moreover, this was just the prelude of the beginning. But at this time, there was no way out. They could only bite the bullet and kill Yi Shiwen to have a way out. Otherwise, they might be drowned by the heavenly tribulation. At that time, they might really be wiped out. Yi Shiwen didn't stop at all. He directly rushed into the sea of lightning. No, it should be said that his body had formed a sea of lightning. The entire heavenly tribulation was centered around him. Crash! In the entire world, there was only the torrential rain of lightning and the continuous screams. These devils thought that the previous scene was terrifying enough, but they soon found that they were wrong, and they were very wrong. For them, even a few of these lightning bolts were already very powerful heavenly tribulations. It was simply unimaginable for them to turn into a torrential rain like this. But this torrential rain of lightning did not stop. On the contrary, those lightning dragons began to grow larger. If those lightning dragons were only as thick as a water snake at the beginning, then these lightning dragons were really as thick as a water tank now. If one of them came down, even a mountain peak would be completely smashed into pieces. And this was nothing compared to the pressure that Yi Shiwen had endured in the middle. With Yi Shiwen as the center, the lightning dragons that fell were 10 times more than what they had endured. The lightning dragons were like a small river, smashing down fiercely. Bang! Yi Shiwen was directly hit by a lightning dragon, and his head was badly mutilated. His whole body was blasted to the ground, and it could be said that he fell head first into the ground. Not far away, Azura City Lord and the other 2 devils originally wanted to take advantage of the heavenly tribulation to kill Yi Shiwen, but now they didn't even dare to think about it. If they wanted to kill Yi Shiwen, they would first have to endure the bombardment of the lightning dragons. They didn't care about the lightning dragons that the other devils had to endure, but they couldn't ignore the lightning dragons that Yi Shiwen had to endure, especially that Azura City Lord. He had fought with Yi Shiwen many times, so he was very clear about how terrifying Yi Shiwen's body was. Azura City Lord was famous for their tyrannical body, but he was so many realms higher than Yi Shiwen, yet he couldn't gain the upper hand in terms of body. This was enough to show how terrifying Yi Shiwen's body was. But now, even Yi Shiwen's skin and flesh were torn by a lightning dragon, and his body was covered in green smoke. This heavenly tribulation was so terrifying that he almost trembled with fear at a glance. The heavenly tribulation on his side couldn't compare to what Yi Shiwen had endured, but it was still several times stronger than what ordinary devils had to endure. Even as experts at the 4th level of the celestial realm, they had to face it with all their strength, or they might be directly killed. Therefore, although they wanted to kill Yi Shiwen immediately, especially the Azura City Lord, there were screams all around. After such a long time, those demons below the Law Manifestation Realm were all dead. Even among the Law Manifestation Realm demons, there were only a few extremely tyrannical experts left. Many of the half-step Celestial Realm experts were also injured, and many of the Celestial Realm experts were gritting their teeth and holding on. And these were the essence of their city, and it was precisely by ruling these people that he had the income to support himself. But if even these people died, then wouldn't he become a commander without an army? It could be said that it was a serious injury to the Foundation. But even so, he could only endure it. There was no other way. He had to endure until Yi Shiwen's heavenly tribulation was over. That was the best opportunity to kill him. Before that, he must protect himself and not be killed by the heavenly tribulation. Otherwise, everything would be in vain. Yi Shiwen plummeted into the ground, but his body was so powerful that it was like a cannonball. He directly fell down, and the entire ground cracked open. Countless lightning dragons also fell in the water of the moat next to him. This moat, which had been calm for countless years, was evaporated by the lightning at this time. Everything was like the end of the world. God was destroying the world, especially those devils in the heavenly tribulation who were screaming incessantly. It was really an unexpected disaster. At the same time, when Yi Shiwen crashed into the ground, more than a dozen lightning dragons directly struck his body. Boom! 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 Small mushroom clouds rose from his body. One could imagine how powerful this power was. It was really too terrifying. Yi Shiwen's skin and flesh were torn open, and his bones and flesh were scattered. Almost his entire body was destroyed. More heavenly tribulation directly bombarded from the sky, wanting to kill Yi Shiwen. Even the glimmer of life that he had in the past was almost gone. The celestial being realm was different from all the previous realms. This was a realm that could integrate with the heavenly law. It could be said that it had reached the peak state that mortals could reach. Therefore, the heavenly tribulation was fundamentally different from the past. Moreover, it was directly affected by these devils, and directly became several times more tyrannical. There was no chance of survival at all. Clang, clang, clang. The sound of metal colliding resounded, and the 8 treasures heaven and earth cauldron automatically rose from Yi Shiwen's body to protect him. But even so, the 8 treasures heaven and earth cauldron trembled under the bombardment, as if it was withstanding the dreadful attack of a peerless master. Then, even more lightning dragons that resembled a small river chased after them. Chapter 1469. They didn't give Yi Shiwen any chance to breathe. Boom! 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 Dozens of thunder dragons slammed on the 8 treasure universe cauldron on the spot. This was almost equivalent to dozens of top masters slamming on the 8 treasure universe cauldron in an instant. The laws hanging down from the 8 treasure universe cauldron collapsed in an instant, and the 8 treasure universe cauldron was blasted away in an instant. This was an unprecedented situation. The 8 treasure universe cauldron was mastered by Yi Shiwen, and he had the complete sacrificial refining technique of the 8 treasure universe cauldron. As time passed, the 8 treasure universe cauldron was more and more controlled by him. Even the power of a celestial realm master could be easily blocked. Now, it was directly blasted away from Yi Shiwen's body. This showed the terrible power of these thunder dragons. However, although the 8 treasure universe cauldron was blasted away, it also gave Yi Shiwen some time. Although this time might be too short for others, for Yi Shiwen, this time was enough for him to recover from the injuries in his body. He stood up again. At this time, there were still bloodstains on his body, but the injuries on his body had almost recovered. The original place where the skin and flesh were torn had now grown pink tender flesh. Although it was not the same as the muscles and other parts of the body, it only took such a short time to recover to such an extent. This Phoenix regeneration technique was really shocking enough. Azura City Lord and the others, who weren't far from them, were dumbstruck. They had been secretly delighted because it was finally over. Yi Shiwen would soon be struck to death by the heavens. They hadn't expected that the target they had been scheming to deal with would die in such a manner. But what they didn't expect was that Yi Shiwen had actually recovered in such a short time. It was simply shocking. This? The Azura City Lord was in disbelief. The corner of his mouth was trembling as if he had seen the most incredible scene. Boom! A bolt of lightning struck down and directly blasted on his body, causing him to stagger and almost fall to the ground like Yi Shiwen. He quickly stabilized his body. If he was blasted to the ground, it could be said that he didn't even need to think about it to know what would happen if he was blasted to the ground. There was no possibility of survival. He was not as abnormal as Yi Shiwen. Even the Azura City Lord, who was known for his powerful physical body, was in such a state, let alone the great Devil City Lord and the original Devil City Lord. They couldn't imagine that a person's physical body could reach such a level. Yi Shiwen didn't hesitate at this time. He directly launched a punch towards the thunder dragon that was attacking him from all over the sky. The surging golden fist force tore through the sky, shattering the void and colliding with the golden lightning. Boom! A series of terrifying explosions rang out in the void. Dazzling light covered the entire void. The dazzling light covered everything, so dazzling that people couldn't open their eyes. However, Yi Shiwen felt an incomparably terrifying power falling down on him. Although it had blasted away those lightning bolts, the power still fell on his body. Kara! A large part of Yi Shiwen's body suddenly fractured, completely broken, and then his body was directly blasted out, directly smashing to death several demon experts who were half a step into the celestial being realm who did not have time to dodge. One could imagine how terrifying this power was. Puff! Yi Shiwen still couldn't hold back his tumbling chi and blood, and directly spurted out a mouthful of blood. He quickly mobilized the Phoenix regeneration technique in his body to repair the injuries on his body. Fortunately, although the injuries were serious, they could only be regarded as superficial injuries. There were no deeper internal injuries. However, even if there were internal injuries, he didn't have time to care. At this time, he could only persist and hold on. If he couldn't even hold on, he couldn't advance to the celestial being realm. Walala! Dozens of thunder dragons swooped down from the sky. They were even more terrifying than the previous ones. They didn't give Yi Shiwen any time to rest. At this time, Yi Shiwen stretched out his hand, and the 8-treasure universe cauldron that was blasted to the side directly rose up. Boom! 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 As expected, the 8-treasure universe cauldron was blasted out again, and the hanging light curtain was almost completely destroyed in an instant. Then, the remaining thunder dragons blasted into the 8-treasure universe cauldron. Buzz! The 8-treasure universe cauldron kept buzzing, as if it was in great pain. Even if it was a top-level heaven-grade instrument, it was still a great burden to be bombarded by these heaven's retribution continuously. If it continued, it might even break. A top-level heaven-grade instrument was not omnipotent. In the end, Yi Shiwen's strength was not enough to truly exert the peak strength of a heaven-grade instrument. He was only a half-step celestial being realm, and it was very difficult to rely on his own strength to forcibly hold on. But at this time, Yi Shiwen couldn't care so much. Even if the 8-treasure universe cauldron was completely destroyed by the heaven's retribution, it was better than dying tragically under the heaven's retribution. With this buffer time, Yi Shiwen once again recovered to the extent of 70 to 80%. Boom! Yi Shiwen clenched his 5 fingers into a fist, and the surging fist power turned into a long dragon, shattering the vast sky, and launched an attack against the heaven's retribution. The sky full of thunder dragons had already encountered Yi Shiwen's surging fist power before they fell. Boom! Yi Shiwen was blasted away almost without any accident. It was unknown how many bones in his body were broken, and he spat out a mouthful of blood again. And not far away, the Azura City Lord and the other 2 were even more dumbfounded. He dared to attack the heaven's retribution, and he was also a ruthless person. At this time, they had already faintly regretted in their hearts. Why did they provoke such a guy? He was simply abnormal and not human. Such a ruthless person, such a heaven's retribution, in itself, indicated that this was an extraordinary and terrifying expert. But there was no other way. They had already provoked him, so there was only one way, and that was to go all out and kill Yi Shiwen. Boom! 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 Yi Shiwen didn't know how many times he had persisted. Time had no meaning for him. It could be said that he had entered the peak state. Behind him, the enlightening mind ancient tree had transformed into 7 colored rays of light which fell into his mind. It was protecting his spirit platform so that it wouldn't be blasted by the thunder and lightning. This was not superfluous, because the lightning in the heaven's retribution did not only affect the physical body but also the mind. Many people could not bear such a continuous bombardment of the divine sense, and in the end, their entire mind collapsed, and they were annihilated in the heaven's retribution. But with the protection of the 7-colored light, Yi Shiwen did not need to worry about this. But every time he was blasted away like this, and stood up again, he was almost a little numb. Although it was only the most ordinary heaven's retribution at the beginning, it was already far more dangerous than the previous law phase realm heaven's retribution by more than 100 times. Finally, after a long time, the entire world suddenly became clear, and the originally unceasing falling lightning storm finally stopped. The reality was silent, and then there was a cheer. The remaining demons were all cheering, as if they had survived the end of the world. That kind of feeling of narrowly escaping death, they might not forget it in this life. Looking at the radius of hundreds of miles, it had been completely turned into ruins. The mountains were flattened, and the city had also turned into powder, drifting away with the wind. Although this city had the existence of the formation to protect the city, it was useless. Under the terrifying power of the heaven's retribution, it was directly turned into nothingness, and there was no effect at all. Everywhere was a scene after the end of the world. And at this time, the original hundreds of thousands of demons, at this time, only a scale of less than 1,000 people, all of whom were experts above the half-step celestial realm. As for the demons below the half-step celestial realm, they had all been annihilated in the heaven's retribution. Is it finally over? Actually survived? This is all because of that human boy. Kill him. We must kill him. After realizing that they had actually survived, many demons began to boil, and they wanted to settle accounts with Yi Shiwen. Hundreds of thousands of demons were enough to form an expedition army, but all of them were annihilated in the heaven's retribution. At this time, all the demons turned their eyes to Yi Shiwen in the center of the field, and saw that he was sitting cross-legged in the sky. His body was extremely miserable, his skin and flesh were torn, and blood was flowing. There was not a piece of good flesh on his body, and some of his bones were even dislocated because of the huge impact of the heaven's retribution. They could see the white bones protruding, looking very terrifying. There was simply no human shape. Even if they were demons, they had always been very cruel and tyrannical, but when seeing this scene, there was still a kind of cold feeling from the bottom of their hearts. What was more frightening was that looking at Yi Shiwen's expression, he was extremely calm, as if there was not the slightest change in his expression, as if the person suffering such pain was not him. Like the legendary Buddha, who cut his flesh to feed the eagle. That degree of endurance, for them, was simply abnormal. The most ruthless person was not how ruthless they were to others, but to be able to be ruthless to themselves. Many people could be extremely cruel to others, but when it was themselves, they often could not bear the slightest bit of pain. So when they saw Yi Shiwen's appearance, even if they were demons who were used to seeing all kinds of cruel things in daily life, at this time, they still shuddered. At this moment, the Azura City Master opened his mouth. The heaven's retribution is not over yet. The great Demon City Lord and the original Demon City Lord beside him nodded slowly and solemnly at this time. Chapter 1470. Heaven's retribution is not over yet. At this time, those devils who wanted to settle accounts with Yi Shiwen finally reacted. Looking at the sky, the clouds in the sky did not disperse. On the contrary, they became denser and denser. A strong heaven's retribution crushed down, falling into everyone's heart, making people have an impulse to kneel down. This was the heaven's retribution that made them incomparably terrifying, the God that ruled all things in the world. Taking advantage of this gap, the injuries on Yi Shiwen's body were almost healed. Clatter! In an instant, the sky began to crazily sweep up the lightning rain. At that moment, the lightning raining down from the sky was no longer an ordinary rain of lightning. Instead, it was 18 types of weapons. Every single one of the weapons contained unimaginable laws. Countless laws were condensed on the surface of the weapons. Every single one of the weapons could kill off a half-step sky human stage expert. If a sky human stage expert was not careful, they would die a horrible death. Boom! 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 Suddenly, the remaining devils screamed again. Those half-step celestial realm devils had already been injured in the previous disaster, and these weapons' thunder retribution were much more terrifying than before. In an instant, many half-step celestial realm devils who were not careful had been bombarded to death. Even many celestial realm devils were seriously injured in an instant when they were not careful. Bang! A lightning axe smashed down on Yi Shiwen's head, almost smashing open a huge hole in his skull, and blood splashed out. Roar! Yi Shiwen let out a long roar, condensing endless sword intent in his hand, and rose to the sky on the spot, instantly slashing down the long sword towards the sky that was falling down from the sky. Boom! It was another terrifying collision. The shock waves rippled out, and countless energy swept out in all directions, crushing the vast sky. Yi Shiwen retreated again and again, spitting out a mouthful of blood directly. On the other side, the devil experts weren't so lucky. Although the lightning tribulation they faced was far inferior to Yi Shiwen's, they appeared to be quite embarrassed at this time. Although each of these lightning weapons wasn't particularly powerful, but when so many of them fell down like raindrops, it was truly terrifying. At this time, they had no choice but to take out their heaven-ranked celestial tools and place them on top of their heads. Innate invincibility, they dissolved all the attacks into nothingness. Their heaven-ranked celestial tools were also very tyrannical. Although they couldn't compare with the 8 treasures heaven and earth cauldron, they could still block these lightning weapons. Therefore, although they were in a somewhat sorry state, They were not in any danger. At this time, the more embarrassed they were, the more they hated Yi Shiwen. If it weren't for him, they wouldn't have been in such a difficult situation. Of course, they wouldn't have thought that if it weren't for their scheme to deal with Yi Shiwen, they wouldn't have been in such a situation. Of course, even so, they had to focus on dealing with it. Otherwise, they would still be struck to death. At this time, many devils of the half-step celestial realm had been struck to death one by one. Yi Shiwen went all out to resist the lightning weapons falling from the sky. For those devils, he didn't care at all. If they wanted to deal with him, fine, but they had to have the guts to come. He himself was very clear about how terrifying the heaven's retribution he had endured was. Those devils would definitely be killed one by one. There would be no exception. Yi Shiwen had an easier time dealing with these weapons of thunder retribution, because when these weapons of thunder retribution fell, they didn't directly fall down, but each transformed into a martial arts trajectory, as if there was a martial arts master behind them controlling them. This way of winning was in line with Yi Shiwen's path. His understanding of martial arts had also reached an extremely profound level, so it was impossible for him to be defeated in this way. Just like the heaven's retribution just now, although there was no trace of martial arts, it was a force that could defeat 10. Without saying much, it directly blasted you to death with brute force. There was no other superfluous words to be said. So Yi Shiwen had no way to take advantage of it. He could only fight it head-on, and no matter how strong his physical body was, in the face of the heaven's retribution that had been strengthened several times, it was impossible for him to withstand. However, the power of these lightning weapons was not inferior to the previous heaven's retribution. More importantly, these lightning weapons were several times denser than before. Therefore, after the initial sparse lightning weapons, suddenly denser lightning weapons directly blasted Yi Shiwen out. After being bombarded by these lightning weapons, a large piece of Yi Shiwen's flesh and blood was taken away. Even his bones were broken on the spot. It seemed to be extremely difficult. Moreover, these lightning weapons were continuous. There was no gap in the slightest. Soon, Yi Shiwen found that even if he was supporting the 8-treasure universe cauldron, the qi in his body was not enough. It was decreasing little by little. Even if he wanted to use the Phoenix regeneration technique, he would need a lot of qi. The consequences of a large reduction of qi were extremely serious. At first, Yi Shiwen could still recover quickly, but later on, the speed of recovery was getting slower and slower, and the frequency of him being blasted out was getting faster and faster. If this continued, the possibility of him being directly blasted to death was skyrocketing. Kill. At this time, a figure appeared in the sky. A loud shout shook the world, and a terrifying coercion swept out in an instant, making many devil race masters who were still struggling to resist the heaven's retribution a little dumbfounded at this time. Looking at the lightning man in the sky, wearing iron clothes and holding a long halberd. What kind of heaven's retribution was this? They had never seen such a terrifying heaven's retribution. What kind of heinous things did this person do? Did God want to destroy his life? Their heaven's retribution, even if it was dozens of times stronger, was not even half of such a heaven's retribution. What kind of evildoer was this? How could he have such a terrifying heaven's retribution? Even the faces of the 3 devil race city lords changed at this time. This lightning man could actually give them a strong sense of crisis. How terrifying was this? Was this just a celestial realm level heaven's retribution? How could it be so terrifying? However, the good thing was that they could feel that this lightning man wasn't specifically targeting them. They even had a gratified smile on their faces. Yi Shiwen was finally going to die. He had to face those weapons of thunder retribution on one hand, and this terrifying lightning man on the other. It was impossible for him to survive. That lightning man took a step forward, as if he had crossed the distance of the sky, instantly crossing through, and rushed in front of Yi Shiwen in an instant. This kind of movement technique was simply extremely fast. Although many weapons of heaven's retribution also hit his body, but he was originally from the same source as these weapons of heaven's retribution, he could even absorb the power of these weapons of heaven's retribution, making himself more tyrannical. Boom! He finally made a move. The long halberd in his hand was like an azure dragon, breaking through the vast sky, tearing a sharp roar, and directly rushing towards Yishiwen's face. The 8 treasures heaven and earth cauldron above Yishiwen's head bloomed with endless light, blocking the weapons of heaven's retribution falling from the sky, and he waved the long sword condensed from the sword intention in his hand, smashing the void, and instantly chopping down in front of him. Although he didn't know the origin of this lightning man, his movement technique was very amazing, but Yishiwen's movement technique was several times faster than his. His demon wings were like a fish in the water in the devil domain, and he didn't even need to use divinity to disguise himself. A pair of pitch-black wings instantly spread out behind him, and spread out, like the clouds in the sky, blotting out the sun, but his speed wasn't slowed down in the slightest. On the contrary, it became even faster. Boom! The long halberd and Yishiwen's long sword fiercely collided, and a loud sound like the Big Bang of the century swept out with a loud rumble. The huge, energy-transformed astral wind directly hit Yishiwen's body, and his body was blasted away like a kite with a broken string. That lightning man only took a slight step back, but Yishiwen was blasted away like a cannonball. Yishiwen consecutively somersaulted hundreds of times in the sky and directly trampled the vast sky. Only then did his figure stop. His face was red, and blood overflowed from the corner of his mouth. His arm had already lost feeling, his bones were fractured, and his flesh had collapsed. The power of this lightning man's attack was really powerful and terrifying. Boom! A loud sound broke through the air, and that lightning man once again blasted in front of Yishiwen. His eyes were cold, and without the slightest expression, the long halberd in his hand directly pierced the vast sky and pierced Yishiwen's body. Boom! Yishiwen's body fiercely hit the ground and directly smashed a big hole in the ground, cracking it open. His whole body was nailed to the ground, and the whole scene looked incomparably terrifying. Shwa! Suddenly, the lightning man tore the vast sky and once again arrived in front of Yishiwen. His 5 fingers clenched into a fist and fiercely punched towards Yishiwen. Like a tidal wave, the fist fiercely blasted down and surged up to the sky. Yishiwen reluctantly raised his other hand to block this punch. Boom! The ground under his body, which had already become a big hole, once again shattered, and the terrible strength directly tore open an abyss and sank hundreds of meters deep because of Yishiwen's body. Crack! Amidst this earth-shattering sound of the collapse, a crisp sound of bone fracture was heard, and his other arm was completely broken and completely lost feeling. His body seemed to be torn apart, especially his 2 arms, which were completely broken. Am I going to die here? Yishiwen roared. He faced the lightning man who was about to attack him once again. However, he suddenly felt a burst of power beginning to emerge from his body. Chapter 1471. Am I going to die here? Yishiwen roared. He faced the lightning man who was about to attack him once again. However, he suddenly felt a burst of power beginning to emerge from his body. Just when he felt that his body had completely collapsed and was at an unprecedented low, a powerful force rose from his body. It was a force that rose from the deepest part of his body, a force that boiled from every cell in his body. A hint of joy appeared on his face, but he didn't dare to stop for even a moment. Borrowing this huge force, he leaped up like a fish and stomped on the ground. In an instant, he retreated continuously, dodging the fatal strikes of the lightning man. Boom! The lightning man's fist blasted into the ground. In an instant, countless forces rampaged, and the entire ground cracked crazily. Then, in an instant, the ground within a radius of a few miles completely collapsed into powder, hundreds of meters high. The power of this lightning man's fist was terrifying. Yishiwen was shocked while retreating. However, his divine thoughts were sweeping through his body. He finally found the source of this inexplicable force. It was none other than his tyrant body of the 9th level. His tyrant body had entered the 9th level a long time ago, but he had been unable to break through the 10th level and truly reach the stage of perfection. According to Yishiwen's deduction, the 10th level of tyrant body was a completely different stage from the 9th level. At the 10th level, the tyrant body was considered to be completely cultivated and was close to perfection. It was even comparable to many supreme races and could compete with the kings among them. As long as Yi Shiwen's combat power was sufficient, he could compete with them. The 10th level of Tyrant Body was also one of the strongest physiques. Even if his bloodline could be inherited, the Tyrant Body would also become one of the new royal physiques of mankind. That was the innate Tyrant Body, not the acquired Tyrant Body like Yi Shiwen. However, Yi Shiwen had been unable to break through the 10th level of Tyrant Body. No matter how many times he felt the barrier of the 10th level, no matter how many times he cultivated, it was useless. He just could not break through the 10th level of Tyrant Body. Now, there were signs of a breakthrough. Yi Shiwen finally understood why he had been unable to break through the 10th level of Tyrant Body. It was because the true mystery of the 10th level of Tyrant Body lay in breaking and establishing. So, no matter how hard he tried before, the effect was very limited. But now, after being forced into a dead end by the Lightning Man, he finally reached the first prerequisite of breaking and establishing breaking. Then it was time to stand back. As long as he could complete this process, he would be able to reach the 10th layer of Tyrant Body. His Phoenix regeneration technique was constantly running and healing his injuries. As long as he was given some time, he would be able to complete the establishment process. Unfortunately, the Lightning Man did not give him this opportunity at all. In an instant, he had once again rushed in front of him. He didn't even have the chance to catch his breath before he charged forward again. Boom! The terrifying fist force smashed out fiercely, causing the entire world to tremble faintly. The fist force swept up a powerful storm and directly blasted over. Yi Shiwen's hands were already broken, and he didn't even have the ability to react. The Lightning Man's fist had already bombarded his body. Bang! His body was like a cannonball, tearing through the sky with a loud and sharp whistling sound. He was directly blasted away and slammed into the ground, causing another part of the ground to completely collapse. The originally flat ground had already been filled with terrifying potholes under the impact of the heavenly tribulation and Yi Shiwen. Destruction and construction. Destruction and construction. Time. Time. Yi Shiwen roared and kept roaring. Time. He needed time. If this continued, he wouldn't have enough time to break through to the 10th layer. He would be bombarded to death by the Lightning Man. The chi in his body had almost been exhausted. Even if the Phoenix regeneration technique could burn his vitality, there was no other way at this time. Suddenly, a light flashed in his mind. 9 revolutions Taishian golden pill. He suddenly remembered the medicinal pill given by the Patriarch. Without any hesitation, he directly grabbed the 9 revolutions Taishian golden pill from Tianyuan mirror with his divine thoughts and directly put it into his mouth. Boom! The moment this 9 revolutions Taishian golden pill entered Yi Shiwen's mouth, it immediately turned into a boundless torrent of energy. It directly blasted into Yi Shiwen's body and spread to every cell in Yi Shiwen's body. At this moment, the Phoenix regeneration technique was like a car that had run out of gas suddenly filled with gas. In an instant, it ran wildly. The serious injuries on his body began to improve at a speed visible to the naked eye. The sternum that had been completely smashed in his chest also slowly recovered at this time. It didn't look so scary anymore. Whoosh! There was another sharp, piercing sound. The Lightning Man had once again chased in front of Yi Shiwen. But at this time, with the supplement of the 9 revolutions Taishian golden pill, Yi Shiwen had already operated the Phoenix regeneration technique and recovered a considerable part of his strength. Shwa! The 2 huge wings behind him began to flap, and his figure directly turned into a black light. In an instant, he had already appeared hundreds of meters away. But this Lightning Man was not slow at all. He took a step forward, and his footwork was extremely marvelous. He actually caught up with Yi Shiwen for a moment. The 2 of them chased each other in the sky. Yi Shiwen's devil wings were fully spread, and he could travel hundreds of miles in an instant. But he did not dare to escape the range of heaven's retribution. Firstly, it was useless. The range of heaven's retribution was following him. He could not escape it even if he escaped. Secondly, the devil experts in this area were trapped in heaven's retribution. They could use the power of heaven's retribution to trap or even kill them. But if he ran around casually, it would definitely attract more devil experts' attention. At that time, if an expert above the 7th level of celestial being realm appeared, even if he had the protection of heaven's retribution, it would be useless. The other party would definitely have the courage and ability to kill him. So although he fled frantically, he only moved within the range of heaven's retribution. This made many devil experts depressed to death. If Yi Shiwen left, then they could also take the opportunity to escape from the range of heaven's retribution. But who knew? Yi Shiwen did not leave at all. It was really depressing. After such a long baptism of weapon thunder retribution, those devil experts who were half a step into the celestial being realm had also been completely wiped out. Even those celestial being realm experts were already dying and could not hold on for too long. Only 100 or so people were left. But every once in a while, there would be screams coming. There were celestial being realm devil experts who were destroyed under heaven's retribution. It came one after another, and there was almost no time to stop. Even the 3 Devil City lords were exhausted at this time. It was unknown how many demonic tools were destroyed in heaven's retribution. It could be said that they suffered heavy losses. They were also struck by the weapon thunder retribution from time to time. It could be said that they suffered heavy losses. At this time, it was difficult for them to even protect themselves. How could they have the mind to find trouble with Yi Shiwen? As for the surprise attack after Yi Shiwen's retribution, that would also wait until after heaven's retribution was over. For them, heaven's retribution was almost endless, and there was no end to it at all. As time passed, Yi Shiwen's injuries were almost healed. His exhausted real elemental energy was also completely replenished because of the 9 revolutions Taishian golden elixir. Even if Yi Shiwen consumed a little, he could immediately replenish a little. Moreover, the 9 revolutions Taishian golden elixir itself had healing functions. Yi Shiwen finally understood why it was said that with the 9 revolutions Taishian golden elixir, the chances of passing heaven's retribution would increase by more than 50%. If there was originally a 50% chance, then there was almost a 100% chance. At this time, he was a little regretful. If he had swallowed the 9 revolutions Taishian golden elixir at the beginning, then he would not have to fight so hard. He waited until his injuries were almost healed. Then he turned around, and his sword soared into the sky and chopped down towards that lightning man. Boom! Another terrifying explosion resounded, and the lightning man retreated a step. However, Yi Shiwen didn't get blasted away like before. He only retreated 7 steps, and then his figure stopped. This was also a great progress for him. Although his tyrant body was still in the stage of being reborn after being destroyed, it had not completely transformed into the 10th level of tyrant body scripture. However, compared to a moment ago, there was already a huge change. At this time, the devil experts also noticed the changes in Yi Shiwen. In the beginning, when Yi Shiwen faced the lightning man, he did not have the strength to fight back at all. He was blown away almost every time, and each time was extremely thrilling. He was almost killed directly. But now he only took 7 steps back. This was undoubtedly an extremely shocking result for them. He is simply not human. If he continues to grow like this, who can stop him? Oh my God, the heavens are blind. How did such a scourge grow up? Many devil experts were howling in grief. They saw that Yi Shiwen was getting stronger and stronger. They couldn't help but howl in grief. They could only survive if Yi Shiwen died. If Yi Shiwen didn't die, then they would certainly die. In such a short period of time, half of those celestial realm devil experts have been hacked to death, leaving less than half. The rest were also experts of celestial realm 2nd and 3rd celestial realm. As long as Yi Shiwen persisted for a while, then they would probably die first. Yi Shiwen could feel the power in his body increasing every minute and second. His tyrant body was slowly pushing towards the 10th level. There was a hint of joy on his face. Suddenly, he roared and rushed towards the lightning man again. Chapter 1472. For Yi Shiwen, even if his strength was inferior, he still dared to rush in. Not to mention now that he was constantly completing the process of destruction and establishment. In fact, the gap between the two sides was not as big as before. On the contrary, it was even smaller. How could he not dare to rush in? For him, this was a kind of training. As long as it was training, he had nothing to be afraid of. Whoosh! Yi Shiwen's figure tore through the void. His physical body had already reached an extremely terrifying level. Many celestial realm cultivators' physical bodies simply could not withstand a single blow from him. He could even tear the void while running without the slightest chi. It could be seen how terrifying Yi Shiwen was. His physical body had already become strong to a certain extent. As the saying goes, strength proves the way. He now had a little bit of this trend. Boom! The energy formed a huge shock wave, sweeping away. Yi Shiwen and the Lightning Man fought against each other. Yi Shiwen retreated again and again, only stopping after retreating 7 steps. There was a burst of chi and blood in his body, almost gushing out. The power of this Lightning Man was absolutely tyrannical and terrifying. Again, now, Yi Shiwen only felt that every cell in his body was spewing out energy and undergoing a perfect transformation. Once he had any injury, he would immediately use Phoenix regeneration technique to repair it. He was not afraid of such a battle at all. Coupled with the endless energy provided by the 9 revolutions, Taishian Golden Pill, Yi Shiwen could fight with the Lightning Man unscrupulously. Yi Shiwen rushed out again. The long sword pierced the sky, and the cold light shone under the sky. Boom! 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 Yi Shiwen and this Lightning Man were constantly colliding. Every collision would cause the entire world to shake violently, just like an earthquake. The sky would collapse, and the earth would sink. Yi Shiwen's physical body was invincible. This Lightning Man's physical body was also condensed from countless heavenly laws. It was also incomparably hard. The collision between the two sides could definitely be described as a tit against an awl. Yi Shiwen wasn't afraid of death, but the Lightning Man didn't know what death was. He was purely condensed from the principles of the Great Way. So, death was nothing to him. 6 steps. Yi Shiwen was knocked out by the Lightning Man once again. However, he didn't retreat for 7 steps. Instead, he retreated for 6 steps. It was only 1 step, but it represented his progress for Yi Shiwen. Yi Shiwen became even more excited upon seeing the prey. So, he once again pounced towards that Lightning Man to kill. Boom! 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 Yi Shiwen's strength would increase with every collision, and his tyrant body had also begun to gradually reveal its might. 5 steps, 4 steps, 3 steps, 2 steps, 1 step. There was no movement at all. Yi Shiwen was growing at an astonishing speed in the eyes of those devils. It should be said that his tyrant body was advancing to the 10th layer at an astonishing speed. Those devils had already been killed or injured by this time. Only the 3 city lords of the devil race were still struggling to support themselves. Yi Shiwen hadn't killed the Lightning Man for a while. However, he hadn't been defeated for a while either. Therefore, the time for crossing the heavenly tribulation had been greatly delayed. These devils were finally unable to resist this terrifying heavenly tribulation and had perished one after another. Originally, Yi Shiwen's tribulation was already terrifying enough. Not to mention that there were hundreds of thousands of devils causing the tribulation power to be upgraded. Even if they had also entered the celestial realm, it was not easy for them to persist until now. The 3 city lords were able to persist because they had entered the celestial realm intermediate stage. But even so, they were already very embarrassed. Many of their body protection instruments had collapsed. With only their own physical strength, they did not dare to take the tribulation head-on like Yi Shiwen. Originally, Yi Shiwen did not dare to take the tribulation head-on against these weapons. He could only rely on the 8 treasures universe cauldron to forcibly take it. But now, as his tyrant body was becoming more and more tyrannical, he gradually did not need the 8 treasures universe cauldron on top of his head. His physical body alone was enough to resist these weapons of tribulation. These weapons of tribulation could no longer cause fatal damage to him. Gradually, Yi Shiwen and this lightning man were attacking and defending each other, and they were not at a disadvantage. Come again. Yi Shiwen's fighting spirit was surging, and he fought with this lightning man. Boom! Yi Shiwen's sword slashed this lightning man a few steps back. A powerful sword aura soared into the sky, crushing in all directions. Yi Shiwen raised his head and let out a long roar. He could feel that a powerful force was boiling in his body. Little by little, it was finally reaching the apex. Boom! Suddenly, the momentum of Yi Shiwen's body swept up crazily. The golden divinity surged like a wave. His whole person looked like a god. A powerful force was boiling in his body. The tyrant body of the 10th level. This was the tyrant body of the 10th level. Yi Shiwen could feel that his strength had changed dramatically compared to before. Now, even if he were to fight with a master of the 4th level of the celestial realm, he was confident that he could defeat them. Moreover, this was under the condition that he had not yet stepped into the 1st level of the celestial realm. When he stepped into the 1st level of the celestial realm, he was absolutely confident that he would be invincible in this realm. His cold eyes were also stained with some gold. He looked at that lightning man and finally moved. Ripped! His body directly tore the void, shuttling in the chaos, and in an instant, he had already arrived in front of that lightning man. This was a method that only a master of the celestial realm could use, because tearing the void would cause a backlash from the law of heaven. Only a master of the celestial realm could integrate into the void to offset this backlash. But Yi Shiwen was not like this. He relied on the terrifying strength of the tyrant body of the 10th level to forcibly withstand this backlash. The several Demon City lords in the distance were really dumbfounded. If they were not locked by the Heaven's Retribution and could not leave before the Heaven's Retribution ended, they would have already turned around and fled at this time. This was simply a monster. Was he still human? How could he let them live? Boom! Yi Shiwen clenched his 5 fingers into a fist, and the golden fist bloomed with endless golden light as he punched over. Boom! The lightning man simply had no time to react and was punched by Yi Shiwen on the spot. After advancing to the 10th level, Yi Shiwen's speed had also undergone a tremendous change. The lightning man who could originally keep up with Yi Shiwen was now completely unable to keep up with Yi Shiwen. He didn't even have time to react before he was punched by Yi Shiwen. Even because the speed was too fast, this lightning man did not even fly out. Instead, his entire chest was punched by Yi Shiwen, and there was a huge crack directly forming a black hole. If it was a normal creature, this degree of injury would be enough to seriously injure it even if it did not kill it immediately. But for the lightning man who was originally lifeless, this was nothing. Almost immediately, almost without any hesitation, the long halberd in his hand thrusted toward Yi Shiwen on the spot. Whoosh! There was an ear-piercing sound, and the long halberd attacked like a long dragon. However, Yi Shiwen's reaction was faster, and he directly grabbed the long halberd with one hand. Boom! There was a loud sound of gold and iron colliding. That long halberd was actually caught by Yi Shiwen's hand. The long halberd slashed in his hand, and it directly caused bursts of sparks to splatter in all directions. His long halberd was now unable to cause any fundamental damage to Yi Shiwen, who had already stepped into the 10th level of Tyrant Body. Ha! Yi Shiwen shouted loudly, and directly lifted the lightning man with one hand. Then he suddenly fiercely threw the lightning man out. Boom! The lightning man was directly thrown into the ground, and the terrifying force directly smashed a huge crack in the ground. Then, a golden flash cut through the sky, and the long halberd in Yi Shiwen's hand was also instantly thrown by Yi Shiwen. It directly cut through the sky and directly nailed the lightning man who was trying to struggle to get up to the ground again. Boom! There was another loud noise, and the terrifying force that Yi Shiwen threw directly smashed the entire ground for hundreds of meters. Pa! The lightning man was not afraid of death at all. He directly grabbed the long halberd that was nailed to his body with one hand, and wanted to get up to fight back. However, how could Yi Shiwen give him this opportunity? He tore a huge afterimage in the sky, and arrived in front of that lightning man in an instant. Then he stretched out his big hand and pressed it towards that lightning man's head. Boom! The lightning man's head was directly crushed by Yi Shiwen on the spot. Countless lightning energy was absorbed by Yi Shiwen on the spot, and it made a lot of progress in the 10th level of Tyrant Body. Then, Yi Shiwen did not stop at all. He directly stomped on the other parts of the lightning man, and all the energy was absorbed into his body. The momentum in his body was constantly rising, and the 10th level of Tyrant Body was completely stabilized by this force. As the lightning man was crushed, the tribulation clouds in the sky gradually dissipated. At this time, Yi Shiwen did something that almost scared the 3 Demon Race City lords to death. His figure directly flew into the air, and then turned into a big hand, directly grabbing towards the tribulation clouds on the spot. Boom! The entire tribulation clouds were directly crushed by him, and turned into an endless torrent of energy that was absorbed into his body. His momentum once again skyrocketed. Is he human? How dare he provoke the heavens like this? Although the will of the heavens was also retracted after the end of the heavens' retribution, and the remaining was purely the energy of the heavens' retribution, they had never heard of anyone who dared to do so and could do so. But now, they heard it from Yi Shiwen. How could they not be shocked? It was as if they had seen a ghost. As the tribulation clouds faded, Yi Shiwen felt that the realm barrier of the celestial realm that had been suppressing him finally disappeared, and his realm cultivation finally broke into the celestial realm in one fell swoop without any hindrance. Chapter 1473. Celestial Realm, First Level. Yi Shiwen's aura finally stepped into the Celestial Realm First Level in one go, which was more than 10 times stronger than before. Moreover, the energy of the 9 revolutions Taishan Golden Elixir in Yi Shiwen's body had not been completely consumed. Even though Yi Shiwen was sent to the Celestial Realm First Level, the huge amount of energy had not been exhausted yet. In one go, Yi Shiwen stabilized the Celestial Realm First Level in one fell swoop, and was moving towards the peak of the Celestial Realm First Level. The current Yi Shiwen was incomparably powerful, like a legendary god, standing between heaven and earth, suppressing everything. He finally stepped into the Celestial Realm. Now Yi Shiwen could finally experience his own strength. Originally, he needed to use all his strength to be able to shatter the space, but now he could easily shatter the space with just his physical strength. And at this time, not far away, the 3 Devil City lords were a little stunned the moment the heaven retribution disappeared. Disappeared? The heaven retribution of the celestial realm disappeared? For them, this was simply an extremely long period of time, even giving them the feeling that it was longer than the time they had experienced since birth. Every minute and every second was like a century of suffering. There was even a long period of time when they felt that this heaven retribution might never end. Although they themselves felt that this idea was absurd, it just gave them such a feeling. Now that it suddenly ended, they were a little not used to it. Is it really over? When they realized that it might really be over, their first thought was no longer to find trouble with Yi Shiwen and kill him in a weakened state. What kind of joke was this? Did Yi Shiwen look like he was in a weakened state? On the contrary, the current Yi Shiwen was not in the weakest state in history. On the contrary, he was in the most powerful state in history. His realm had stepped into the Celestial Realm First Level, coupled with the Tyrant Body scripture breaking through to the 10th level in one go, made his combat strength simply terrifying. Originally, they still had the confidence to suppress Yi Shiwen, but it still required 3 people to work together to kill him. But now, Yi Shiwen, who had stepped into the Celestial Realm, gave them a terrifying feeling that they could not match him. At this moment, their first reaction was to scatter in all directions. They knew very well that they would certainly have some assurance if they chose to run away together. However, it was more likely that they would be caught by Yi Shiwen in one fell swoop. Moreover, they had seen with their own eyes how Yi Shiwen had blown up that lightning man. They didn't think that the 3 of them would be a match for Yi Shiwen even if they joined hands. After all, Yi Shiwen wasn't an opponent at the same level as them. Where do you think you're going? Yi Shiwen sneered. A look of hatred flashed in his eyes. He could still vaguely remember the relief he felt when that old human woman had exploded in front of his eyes. And all of this was because of them. In order to force Yi Shiwen to come out, they had done everything they could to force him to come out. The first person Yi Shiwen caught up with was the Azura City Lord. He raised his long sword, raised his hand, and slashed out a shocking sword energy that was hundreds of meters long. Bang! The Azura City Lord dodged the most fatal sword energy at the critical moment. However, his entire arm was blasted into a bloody mist by Yi Shiwen's sword. At this moment, he didn't even dare to look back. He was simply scared out of his wits. Was this still a human who had just stepped into the heaven realm? He was simply a fierce god, a killing god. If he hadn't seen it with his own eyes, he wouldn't have believed it at all. What revenge in the future? What revenge? Wasn't he still going to see Yi Shiwen again? This was too terrifying. He would rather not take revenge than see Yi Shiwen again. During this period of time, Yi Shiwen had basically become a nightmare in his heart. Oof. You think you can escape? Yi Shiwen saw that the Azura City Lord tore the void and was about to escape from the alternate space. He immediately clenched his 5 fingers into a fist and punched out. Boom! The surging fist power swept out and spread out endless energy waves, shattering the endless void. Even the Azura City Lord, who had already escaped into the alternate space, couldn't escape at all. He was hit by Yi Shiwen's fist power on the spot. Bang! He was directly blasted into a bloody mist by Yi Shiwen's fist. The blood in his body had been completely absorbed by the Tianyuan mirror. At this time, Yi Shiwen turned his gaze to the great Demon City Lord and the original Demon City Lord. At this time, the two were almost scared to death. Originally, when they saw Yi Shiwen chasing after the Azura City Lord, they were secretly glad that this killing god really hated the Azura City Lord more and didn't take the initiative to attack them. Who knew that Yi Shiwen would actually kill the Azura City Lord so quickly? The Azura City Lord, who was so arrogant before, didn't even last 2 moves from Yi Shiwen before he was directly blasted to death. This kind of efficiency was simply frightening. This was a master at the 4th level of the Heaven Realm. He had stepped into the middle level of the Heaven Realm. He wasn't a chicken, duck, or dog, yet he was so casually slaughtered. Yi Shiwen, we don't have a big grudge against you. As long as you let us go, we are willing to pay a ransom for our lives. What do you think? At this time, the original Demon City Lord was relatively calm. He shouted while escaping, hoping that Yi Shiwen would let him go. Ransom? Yi Shiwen said. That's right, ransom. No matter how much you want, we can find a way to raise it for you. We were wrong this time. We won't provoke you again in the future. The original Demon City Lord saw that Yi Shiwen was somewhat tempted and immediately said, although this time he would have to bleed a lot, it was still better than losing his life. As for reneging on a debt, it was something that he had never thought about. The reason was very simple. The Azura City Lord had only ambushed Yi Shiwen once and was chased until now, even losing his life. If they dared to not keep their word, then the consequences in the future would be terrifying. Count my ass. Yi Shiwen spat out these words coldly. Go repent to the humans that you killed. Repent. We are willing to repent. At this time, the great Demon City Lord quickly shouted. Well, then you can go to hell to repent. Yi Shiwen sneered, and the demon wings behind him directly stretched out. In an instant, he had already caught up with the great Demon City Lord and suddenly stomped down. Bang! The great Demon City Lord had no time to dodge and was directly trampled by Yi Shiwen's foot. The power of Tyrant Body that had entered the 10th layer was unimaginable. One stomp directly crushed the great Demon City Lord's body into pieces. Yi Shiwen directly slashed out a big hand. Except for the head, the other parts of the great Demon City Lord's body exploded into a mass of blood mist and was absorbed by Tianyuan mirror. As for the head, Yi Shiwen put it away. This was the evidence that Yi Shiwen had beheaded a celestial realm 4th level devil. Then, Yi Shiwen immediately chased after the original Demon City Lord. Although the original Demon City Lord deliberately chose a completely different escape route from the great Demon City Lord, Yi Shiwen's speed was simply too fast after unfolding the demon wings. In an instant, he had already caught up again. Clang! The long sword in Yi Shiwen's hand crazily emitted a strong light. Then it split into countless sword lights in the void and combined into a sword lotus. Then it fell on the body of the original Devil City Lord with a thunderous sound. Boom! The original Demon City Lord's body was crushed into pieces on the spot by the countless sword lotuses and turned into blood mist, which was absorbed by Tianyuan Mirror. Ah! Suddenly, a loud roar came from Yi Shiwen's body, and then a huge demon shadow appeared from his body. It was none other than Yi Mo. But this time, it was not Yi Mo's body, but a trace of Yi Mo's soul. Yi Shiwen, so much blood chi. How many devils have you killed? Yi Mo's face had a somewhat ecstatic look. This is the devil domain? So, you have entered the devil domain? Yes. Yi Shiwen made a long story short and told him about the things that happened after Yi Mo fell into a deep sleep. Yi Mo was silent for a moment, and then said, I can't help you with this matter. Now, because I absorbed the blood chi of these celestial realm devils, I temporarily awakened a trace of soul. As for the main body, I don't know how long it will take. Originally, when you were in the devil domain, I wanted you to go to the lost land in the devil domain to find the Demon King's divine treasury. At that time, your cultivation will also have a huge improvement, but now it seems that the imperial court struggle is more important. I won't say much. During this time, you can only rely on yourself. I will soon fall into a deep sleep again. After saying that, Yi Mo's figure gradually began to disappear from the world. Yi Shiwen didn't care about it. Yi Mo's awakening at this time was indeed a great surprise for him. However, he also knew that it was impossible for Yi Mo to wake up now. At most, a wisp of his soul would be awakened. Lost Land. Yi Shiwen read this name. Since Yi Mo said this place, then it must be the place where the Demon King, whom he had followed before, had buried the divine treasury. But Yi Mo also refused to disclose more information. Even the several Demon Kings of the Devil Domain, Yi Shiwen still didn't know which Demon King Yi Mo had followed. However, although he couldn't figure out these things, Yi Shiwen didn't think too much about it. He immediately unfolded the devil wings and flew towards the direction of the Devil Domain and the Yi clan's border. This place couldn't stay for a long time. The entire city of devils had been slaughtered by Yi Shiwen with the heaven's retribution. Such a big matter would soon alarm the higher-ups of the devil race, and at that time, he was afraid that another investigation would be inevitable. Moreover, the imperial court struggle had already begun. Wait for me. Yi Shiwen's eyes were incomparably firm. Chapter 1474. Yi Shiwen's speed was extremely fast when he fully unfolded his demon wings. Plus, he had already stepped into the celestial realm, so he could use some of the celestial realm's techniques. Compared to when he first arrived, it was completely different. Even though he had to go through the human-demon battlefield, it only took him half a day to return to the other side of the battlefield controlled by the Yi clan. When he returned to the other side of the battlefield controlled by the Yi clan, he felt as if a lifetime had passed. Although it had only been 2 years, it felt like a lifetime had passed. Stepping into the celestial realm meant that he had stepped into the top ranks of the ancient barons. Although he was not as strong as the celestial realm experts of the 7th level, he was still a big shot. And most importantly, the celestial realm was equivalent to his protective talisman. Stepping into the celestial realm at the age of 200 was simply shocking. As long as the higher-ups were not stupid, they should know what this meant. At the same time, they would do their best to protect him and not continue to threaten to kill him. This was his biggest protective talisman, even more powerful than the protection of the Law Enforcement Hall's Hallmaster. Yi Shiwen did not stay here for long and directly left the Demon Domain Channel. Although he was exiled to the Demon Domain Channel, in fact, no one was watching him. It was just that the clan master had stipulated that if he did not complete those tasks, he could not leave at will. Now that he had completed this task, the so-called banishment naturally did not exist. He could leave whenever he wanted. When Yi Shiwen returned to the Yi family, the entire Yi family was discussing about the imperial court struggle. This matter could be regarded as the most important matter in the entire human race. Every time the imperial court struggle started, countless elites of the human race would gather. Moreover, all of them were elites of the younger generation. If it were any other force, it would be impossible to gather all these Heaven's Pride experts together, but Imperial Court could. Until now, Imperial Court was still recognized as the common ruler of the entire human race. Although it no longer had the prestige of commanding the world in the ancient times, it was still the world's top force. Although a force like the Yi clan could be called a rich and powerful family with countless resources, compared to Imperial Court, there was still a huge gap. Even a peerless expert like the Yi clan's clan master had to hold a position in Imperial Court. Yi clan also had a large number of elite experts serving in Imperial Court. Not only Yi clan, but also other clans. Only the royal court had such rallying power. The entire Yi clan was shocked when Yi Shiwen returned to the Yi clan. How could they forget this man who had caused a lot of trouble a few years ago? However, everyone thought that he would have to stay in the Devil World Passage for 10 years, decades, or even hundreds of years if he wasn't careful. After all, the tasks assigned by the Patriarch were not easy to complete. Even if it was an expert at the 4th layer of the Sky Human Realm, it would still be very difficult to complete such a task within 2 years. That was because experts at the 4th layer of the Sky Human Realm and above were enough to oversee a region. They were not common. Just finding them was already very difficult. They didn't expect that Yi Shiwen would enter the Devil World and turn it upside down. It was not easy to find so many Sky Human Stage experts in the passageway to the Demon Plane. However, it would be much easier to find them in the Demon Plane. Additionally, he had relied on the Heavenly Tribulation to kill off a high number of demon experts. Adding the ones he had killed before, it was enough. When Yi Shiwen returned to the Yi clan, he didn't even have time to rest before he was immediately summoned by the higher-ups. In a microcosm, on top of a towering throne, a peerless expert was sitting on it. These were the top experts of the Yi clan. Each of them was an existence that held the power of life and death in the Yi clan. The weakest among them was also a tycoon level of the 7th layer of the Sky Human Realm and above. Yi Shiwen had just entered this microcosm when he suddenly felt a threatening gaze fall on Yi Shiwen's body. It was none other than Yi Jin Mo. Yi Shiwen saw through it at a glance. This was not Yi Jin Mo's real body, but an incarnation that came with a wisp of divine sense. In fact, in this microcosm, there were only a few who came with their real bodies. Most of them were just soul incarnations. After all, they were the existences that held the power of the Yi clan. Usually, if they weren't cultivating, they would be dealing with the Yi clan's affairs. Some of them even served in the royal court. Even if the news of Yi Shiwen's return was sensational, it was impossible for all of them to return. The arrival of a wisp of soul incarnation was already a sign of great concern. Yi Shiwen stood in the void, his bearing as steady as a mountain. Although he had just stepped into the 1st layer of the Sky Human Realm, with the remaining medicinal power of the 9 revolutions Taishian Golden Pill, Yi Shiwen directly stepped into the peak of the 1st layer of the Sky Human Realm. His bearing was restrained, completely without the feeling of being unable to restrain his breath when he had just stepped into a new realm. Yi Shiwen glanced over. These top experts were all the pillars of the Yi clan. In the past, he didn't even have the qualifications to look up to them, but now he could see through their phantoms at a glance. Although a large part of the reason was that they were only soul incarnations, it was enough to show that Yi Shiwen's current strength was completely different from when he had just returned to the Yi clan. You little bastard. You actually dare to appear and violate the rules set by the clan master. I think you really don't want to live. The first one to speak was indeed not others, but Yi Jin Mo. Even Yi Qian only stared coldly at Yi Shiwen from the side. With Yi Jin Mo taking the lead, he obviously intended to watch from the sidelines. What does this matter have to do with you? What are you doing here instead of guarding your devil domain passage? Yi Shiwen said with a sneer. Yi Jin Mo was so impolite, so he naturally would not give him a good attitude. A dog catching mice? Mind your own business. Yi Jin Mo suddenly became furious, and his face turned red. The other tycoons were also holding back their laughter. It was rare to see Yi Jin Mo, who was like a stone in a latrine pit, actually be defeated in words at this time. Many people were also secretly pleased, and the way they looked at Yi Shiwen was also a lot better. And some people who originally disliked Yi Shiwen at this time were even more displeased with Yi Shiwen, and their gazes became more and more unfriendly. Yi Shiwen could naturally feel it, but he didn't care at all. Those people originally disliked him because of other reasons, so why should he give them a good attitude? Bold little bastard, you actually dare to speak to me like this. Sure enough, you and your father are the same. Both are born traitors. Yi Zhenmo suddenly became furious and roared. Be careful with your words. Suddenly, the Yi clan master Yi Tianqiong's reprimanding voice resounded. Yi Zhenmo didn't care and just glared at Yi Shiwen. He had lost the demon-subduing mirror, and it could be said that he was in a very difficult situation. At this time, seeing Yi Shiwen's high-spirited appearance, he suddenly became even angrier. What did you say? Yi Shiwen's heart suddenly tightened, and he shouted. His blood instantly surged and fell on Yi Zhenmo's body, firmly locking him. Little bastard, you actually dare to attack me. I want to see how much progress you have made during this time. A scourge like you should be dealt with as soon as possible. At this time, Yi Zhenmo didn't get angry, but instead smiled. Yi Shiwen's appearance had actually given him the opportunity to attack. At this time, many tycoons sighed. This Yi Shiwen was still too impulsive. Yi Zhenmo had been waiting for Yi Shiwen to give him a handle. Now that Yi Shiwen dared to attack in this place, didn't it give him an excellent handle? Yi Zhenmo directly opened his mouth and whistled out a mouthful of sword qi. The sword light instantly grew to thousands of feet long and chopped towards Yi Shiwen. Old fool, you're courting death. At this time, an angry roar came from the throne. It was Yi Zhentian who had attacked, and a vast and dreadful power enveloped the entire world. He was different from Yi Zhenmo. Yi Zhenmo had come here with a wisp of his soul and couldn't display his full strength. However, he had come here with his real body, and naturally, his power was boundless, and he could defeat Yi Zhenmo's sword qi in an instant. This is a matter between the two of them. You shouldn't interfere. Then a terrifying aura swept out. It was Yi Qian, who had been watching from the side, and he directly blocked Yi Zhentian's attack. At the same time, several tycoons also attacked, and all of them fell towards Yi Zhentian, wanting to stop him. It could be seen that Yi Shiwen indeed had some enemies among the higher-ups of the Yi family, and they had been waiting to deal with him. Although Yi Zhentian's strength was outstanding, but he couldn't face so many top experts, and among them, Yi Qian had also come here with his real body, and his fighting strength wasn't inferior to Yi Zhentian's. So, Yi Zhentian couldn't move for a while. You're courting death. Yi Zhentian suddenly became furious. Master, rest assured, if this old guy's real body had come here, I would have been a bit afraid of him. But he dares to clamor in front of me with just a wisp of his soul? He must be tired of living. Yi Shiwen's complexion didn't change in the slightest. He directly stretched out his big hand, and a big hand blotted out the sky and instantly fell down. Bang! Boundless explosions resounded in succession, and the aftermath of the terrible explosions swept out in circles and shattered the vast sky. However, which one of the people present here wasn't a top expert? So, their eyesight wasn't affected in the slightest. They clearly saw that Yi Shiwen's big hand had directly caught Yi Zhenmo's sword light. Those sword lights chopped on Yi Shiwen's palm, but unexpectedly, they couldn't cut off his palm. On the contrary, they could only leave a little white mark, and that's all. This immediately shocked everyone. They were very clear about Yi Zhenmo's strength, and even if it was merely a wisp of his soul, it would still possess boundless might in the case of an all-out attack. But now, it couldn't even cut Yi Shiwen's skin. Chapter 1475. Yi Zhenmo's strength was needless to say. Even in the Yi clan, he stood at the pinnacle of the small group of people. Even if it was just a wisp of his soul incarnation, it was already much more tyrannical than many celestial realm experts. However, Yi Shiwen was actually able to resist his sword light. This had already shocked these tycoons. How is this possible? Yi Jin Mo's sword light is the suppressing demon sword that he has refined for a long time. It can suppress the heaven and earth, and its power is endless. Yet, it actually can't cut through his flesh. His flesh is too terrifying. Some people seem to recall that Yi Shiwen seemed to have indeed been famous for a period of time for his tyrannical flesh. However, they absolutely did not expect that it could be tyrannical to this extent. What suppressing demon sword? I think it's nothing more than this. Yi Shiwen sneered. His palms suddenly closed. The sword light of the suppressing demon sword was constantly boiling in his palm, trying to tear his palm apart. However, the sword chi had already stepped into the 10th level. Compared to before, there was simply a fundamental gap. If Yi Shiwen had only stepped into the 1st level of Celestial Realm, but had not yet stepped into the 10th level of Tyrant Body, then this suppressing demon sword might really be able to hurt him. However, after stepping into the 10th level of Tyrant Body, this level of sword light could not even hurt him. As he spoke, Yi Shiwen suddenly grabbed, and the entire sword light was crushed by him on the spot, turning into nothingness. What? How is this possible? Yi Jin Mo could not help but be shocked. Although his suppressing demon sword was not a real sword, and was condensed from a wisp of sword intention that he had nurtured, in fact, it was refined with a secret method. It could be said to be infinitely powerful, and a casual sword strike could cut through the heaven and earth. Now, not to mention that it could not do anything to Yi Shiwen. It could not even hurt his skin. What is impossible, old man? Didn't you ask me how I could come out of the Demon Domains channel? Today, I will tell you. As Yi Shiwen spoke, he was actually extremely daring, and took the lead to attack Yi Jin Mo. His 5 fingers clenched into a fist, and the golden fist power turned into a series of ripples. Like a stormy sea, it directly fell towards Yi Jin Mo. His fist power had already reached an astonishing level, far from being comparable to when he had not stepped into the Celestial Realm. Yi Jin Mo was shocked and angry at the same time. How dare you attack me? Yi Jin Mo was enraged. The Jin Yuan on his body instantly boiled. It was like a raging wave beating on the shore, shaking the world. Even if it was only a wisp of his primordial spirit snatched over, it was indeed already comparable to a top expert in the 4th heaven of the heaven tier. If his true body came in person, then it would be even more incredible. Yi Jin Mo immediately whistled out a mouthful of sword ki, which turned into an endless sword ki that swept across the sky like a sword ki river towards Yi Shiwen. Old man, don't blame me for returning the favor. You actually found an excuse to attack me, so don't blame me for being impolite. Yi Shiwen sneered, and then shouted, "Break for me!" An iron sword appeared in his hand. The sword radiance traversed the sky and headed straight for the descending sword river. Rip! With a loud tearing sound, the iron sword in Yi Shiwen's hand directly smashed into Yi Jin Mo's Sorky River. Using a single point to break the surface, Yi Shiwen's Sorky River was torn apart. Then, the iron sword in his hand turned into a waterfall and directly chopped towards Yi Jin Mo's head. The speed of his sword was fast and ruthless. It was incomparably ruthless, just like Yi Jin Mo just now. Once he gained the upper hand, he would completely behead the opponent. Those tycoons who were watching the battle, no matter what kind of thoughts they had, when they saw Yi Shiwen actually gaining the upper hand in the battle, they could not help but be greatly surprised. When did this Yi Shiwen cultivate to this level? How old is he? He's not even 300 years old, yet he already has this kind of cultivation. I'm afraid some of the celestial being realm elders in the clan are no match for him. They would be easily killed by him. This kid grows so fast, but he has a tyrannical temperament. Moreover, he is not cultivated by our Yi clan. I don't know how much of the clan he has in his heart. For us, I also don't know whether it's a blessing or a curse. This kid is so powerful. It reminds me of Yi Junshan in the past. At that time, Yi Junshan seemed to be so invincible. In our generation, he was extremely tyrannical. Such a genius is from our Yi clan. Naturally, the more the better. Some people could not bear to see Yi Shiwen like this, but some people felt indifferent. Each had a completely different view. However, although this Yi Shiwen has the upper hand, he does not know that for those masters of the older generation, which one of them does not have a secret technique? Sooner or later, this Yi Shiwen will suffer a big loss. Do you think you can deal with me like this? Too naive, Yi Zhenmo said with a sneer. At this time, as he spoke, he pinched a few seals in his hand. Countless spiritual energy condensed in the sky, forming a huge bronze ancient seal in the void. Then, this ancient seal directly suppressed down, instantly crushing Yi Shiwen's sword light. It rose against the wind and became more and more powerful. Yi Shiwen was slightly taken aback. This had the same effect as the 8 treasures universe cauldron that he had mastered. It could not only be used to refine a martial instrument, but it was also a very powerful offensive technique. After directly crushing Yi Shiwen's sword light, this ancient seal once again suppressed Yi Shiwen. Yi Shiwen, haha, this ancient seal of mine is obtained from the ancient times. It specializes in suppressing the devil race. You have some skills, but in front of me, you are still far from it. Today, I will use this ancient seal to suppress you, little devil. Yi Zhenmo laughed loudly. The bronze ancient seal directly suppressed down, wanting to suppress Yi Shiwen to death. With just you? You are still far from it. Yi Shiwen sneered. He directly pinched a seal, and an ancient cauldron directly flew out. It was the 8 treasures universe cauldron, but it was not the main body. It was just condensed by Yi Shiwen's real elemental energy. Because the 8 treasures universe cauldron had consumed too much energy during the process of crossing the tribulation. If it was not a heaven-level martial instrument that specialized in defense, it would have been completely broken at this time. But even so, it still needed to be nourished in his body for a considerable period of time. Moreover, this ancient seal was obviously not the main body. It was enough. Boom! At this time, the ancient seal and the ancient cauldron fiercely collided in the sky. The entire world collapsed with a loud bang. Although this world was used by the Yi family's higher-ups to discuss important matters, it only had the function of a conference room. Therefore, it had not been specially reinforced. So, it suddenly collapsed with a loud bang when the two of them fought with all their strength. Many tycoons squinted their eyes and propped up their real elemental energy to resist the chaos that poured out. You old man, you dare to insult my father. Don't think that you can insult him as you wish now that he is not here. Today, I will use his famous unique skill to defeat you. I will make you speechless. Yi Shiwen's anger rose from his heart. Perhaps he had never seen his father in this life, but he would never allow anyone to insult him. This was respect for the ancestors. Then, the imposing aura on Yi Shiwen's body skyrocketed. Although he was merely at the first sky of celestial realm, the imposing aura that swept out was not the slightest bit inferior to Yi Zhenmo's. Then his big hand suddenly clawed out, which turned into a huge dragon claw and directly fell down. Great dragon capture technique. Many tycoons stood up at once. They were familiar with this martial art. It was none other than the great dragon capture technique. Back then, Yi Junshan was invincible with this martial art. Many of the tycoons present, including those who were in the same generation as Yi Junshan, had seen Yi Junshan's strength back then. This move almost immediately made their memories seem to return to many years ago when Yi Junshan showed off his abilities. At this time, Yi Shiwen seemed to have a bit of Yi Junshan's shadow. No, it should be said that the current Yi Shiwen was even more outstanding than Yi Junshan back then. This is impossible. How old is he? He has actually practiced the great dragon capture technique to this extent. It is incredible. He is even more powerful than Yi Junshan back then. Yi Shiwen's dragon claw directly grabbed the ancient bronze seal and then suddenly clawed. This ancient bronze seal, which was still majestic just now, was directly clawed into a cloud of spiritual energy at this time. Then, Yi Shiwen did not stop at all. His momentum did not decrease, and the dragon claw had landed on Yi Zhenmo's body in an instant. The speed was too fast. It was as fast as lightning. It tore the sky, shattered the vacuum, and swept over. Yi Zhenmo had no time to react. Boom! Yi Zhenmo was blasted out on the spot. A mouthful of blood suddenly splashed out. His body flew out like a kite with a broken string. When he was about to hit a mountain, suddenly, in the sky, a dragon claw condensed in the air and then suddenly pressed down. Boom! Yi Zhenmo's body was slapped by the dragon claw on the spot, and he was directly pressed to the ground. The terrifying force directly blasted a huge pit on the ground hundreds of meters high. Countless pieces of land were directly blasted into powder in an instant. Yi Zhenmo's spirit incarnation was also blasted in an instant, and then turned into a cloud of pure spiritual energy, which was absorbed by Yi Shiwen. Silence. There was a dead silence. It seemed that everyone was digesting this shocking fact. Yi Shiwen actually blasted Yi Zhenmo's spirit incarnation. At this time, no one had the mind to pursue Yi Shiwen's responsibility, because this matter was not a big deal. After all, it was just a wisp of spirit incarnation. It was not his real body that was really blasted by Yi Shiwen. For his real body, it might not even be a little bit of damage. For them, what they really cared about was when Yi Shiwen's combat power had become so strong. It was incredible. Chapter 1476. Everyone was shocked. They were digesting this unimaginable fact for them. However, they soon calmed down and accepted this fact. It was useless not to accept it. At this time, they might have guessed that Yi Shiwen could come out naturally, not because his head was clamped by the door, but because he had really completed the task. Although in the eyes of a few insiders, this task was set by the clan master to protect Yi Shiwen, but more people felt that this was an impossible task set by the clan master. Based on Yi Shiwen's situation at that time, it was not easy to kill a master of the first level of Celestial Being Realm. Not to mention, there were so many masters to kill. It was simply impossible to achieve such a feat without a few years. However, who would have thought that Yi Shiwen would fulfill his original promise in a mere 2 years? And he would actually come back. At this time, everyone's expression was very dignified, especially Yi Qian and other high-level Yi clan members who wanted to ignore Yi Shiwen. At this time, their faces were even more ugly. Only Yi Zhentian's face was full of smiles at this time. Yi Shiwen was his disciple, and now Yi Shiwen's performance was outstanding. So naturally, he was also proud. It should be said that his face was quite proud. However, there was also a slight shock in his expression. After all, he did not expect that Yi Shiwen would actually grow to such a point in 2 years. The further one went on the road of cultivation, the more difficult it was to break through. Basically, one had to rely on time to accumulate. If one did not want to rely on time to accumulate, the only way was to constantly have fortuitous encounters or constantly be in a narrow escape from death. It was completely possible to imagine what Yi Shiwen had sacrificed in the past 2 years to reach this point today. Yi Shiwen, now that you have come out of the Devil Domain channel, did you complete the task that I arranged before? At this time, Yi Tianxiong finally spoke. Finally, he did not say a word in the battle between him and Yi Zhenmo. For both sides, he was still in a neutral state, not favoring anyone, especially since Yi Zhenmo was only a wisp of his soul that had been destroyed. In fact, it was not a big deal. Yes! At this time, Yi Shiwen took out the heads of the devil race masters from Tianyuan Mirror. Who were the people sitting here? All of them were the pillars of the Yi family, and they were very knowledgeable. With just a glance, they knew that the heads of these demons were real. Moreover, they were not weaklings among the same realm, but rather experts, especially the head of the Azura Clan City Lord, which was exuding a very strong pressure. Every single one of them showed his tyrannical strength. However, they had all died at the hands of Yi Shiwen. If Yi Shiwen had not fought with Yi Zhenmo a moment ago, then everyone might have suspected that he had obtained these heads through some other means. But after the fight with Yi Zhenmo a moment ago, everyone no longer doubted him. Yi Zhenmo could even destroy the wisp of soul of Yi Zhenmo, let alone these devils, so this was not surprising at all. Good, very good. Since that's the case, we'll write off everything that happened before. Yi Tianxiong said. Thank you, Patriarch. Yi Shiwen heaved a sigh of relief. This matter had been pressing heavily on his shoulders, but there was no other way. In this world, the rules were set by the strong. Although he had now entered the ranks of the strong, but there was still a long way to go. So, it was impossible for him to set his own rules. Now that this matter had been settled by the patriarch, he had one less burden. The most important thing was that he could participate in the imperial court competition. Then Yi Tianxiong sighed slightly and said, I originally thought that you would need at least 10 years to reach this step. Even 10 years was very fast, but I didn't expect that you would be much faster than I thought. Do you really want to participate in the imperial court competition? With your age, wait a few hundred years, and participate in the next imperial court competition, you will absolutely be able to suppress everyone. And even winning the championship will be a piece of cake. Why bother? At this time, many tycoons finally understood Yi Tianxiong's intention. He actually wanted to protect Yi Shiwen. But now that they thought about it, it was also right. If they were in Yi Shiwen's position, they would also do the same. Although Yi Shiwen's current strength was not bad, but in the end, he was still too young. Especially since the imperial court competition invited the top young masters under the age of 800 to participate. In other words, there might be people who had cultivated for a few hundred years more than him. Even though his talent could be considered to be unparalleled, but to be able to participate in the royal court contest, which one of them wasn't a peerless genius. Even the 5 lords of the Yi family, who were the cream of the crop of the younger generation, didn't they wait a year before participating? Why? It was to let him grow to the peak state, participate in the imperial court competition, and establish his supreme prestige in one fell swoop. For a person like him who was only 200 years old, there was still a lot of room for growth in the future. Choosing to participate in the imperial court competition at this time, in the eyes of many, was undoubtedly not worth it, because the imperial court competition could only be participated once. In particular, many people were very clear about the original meaning of the imperial court competition. The younger generation contending for hegemony was just a small matter. The real purpose was to select talents for the imperial court. The outstanding people would be able to obtain the full support of the imperial court. This was a huge force that ruled the entire human race. If they could obtain the full support of the imperial court, then it would mean that they would inevitably become a powerful human overlord in the future. Precisely because of this, there was only one opportunity. Now that it was used up, then in the future, if they wanted to enter the imperial court, they would have to crawl from the beginning. It was impossible for them to be like these geniuses who came out of the imperial court competition, sitting on the fast lane and quickly clenching their fists. Yes, I have a reason to participate. Yi Shiwen cupped his hands in obeisance and said, how could he not know that the patriarch was right, and he was also doing this for his own good? At his age, even if he were to delay for a few hundred years, he would still be considered as a young and promising person. At that time, even if he had to suppress the outstanding heroes in the imperial court competition, he would still have full confidence. This was not because he was arrogant. One must know that he had only practiced for 200 years, that's all. However, he could wait, but Huang Minghan couldn't wait. He must stand out in the imperial court competition. Then he would have the opportunity to enter the imperial court to practice. This was the highest level of human forces, and even the Yi family couldn't compare to it. Moreover, in the imperial court competition, all the geniuses of the human race would gather, and if he could fight against these people, then his strength would rapidly improve. Yi Zhentian also sighed on the side. This disciple was simply not an ordinary kind of stubborn, just like him. Once he had made up his mind, he would not be able to change it. Since he had already made up his mind, then he would move forward bravely. If that's the case, then I won't stop you, Yi Tianxiong said. But you must know one thing, you came back too late. The imperial court competition registration has already ended, and Yi Kuang, Yi Qiong, and the others have already gone to the imperial court, so you can't go with them. If you want to participate in the imperial court competition, you can only register as a rogue cultivator, and you won't be able to enjoy the various benefits of our Yi family. Yi Shiwen was startled for a moment. When he heard that the imperial court competition registration had already ended, he couldn't help but feel exceptionally disappointed. But when he heard that he could register as a rogue cultivator, he couldn't help but feel a glimmer of hope. As long as he could participate in the imperial court competition, it didn't matter what kind of identity he used to participate. Even if he participated as a descendant of the Yi family, it didn't matter. Whether he could stand out or not depended on his own strength, and not what kind of identity he had. "I'm willing," Yi Shiwen said. "If that's the case, then I won't say anything more. You quickly pack up and go, or else the registration for rogue cultivators will also end," Yi Tianxiong said. "Thank you, Patriarch." Yi Shiwen cupped his hands and said. He was grateful from the bottom of his heart, although Yi Tianxiong seemed to be neutral and impartial. But in fact, he was already helping Yi Shiwen. How could Yi Shiwen not be grateful in his heart? After leaving this small world, Yi Shiwen was immediately called by Yi Zhentian. The two directly returned to the main hall of the law enforcement city. "Haha, you did well this time, directly smashing that old bastard," Yi Zhentian said while laughing. Obviously, Yi Shiwen smashing Yi Zhenmo's soul made him very happy. Just now when he wanted to make a move, he was stopped by Yi Qian and the others. He was originally worried that Yi Shiwen wouldn't be able to contend against Yi Zhenmo, who knew that Yi Shiwen not only could contend against Yi Zhenmo, but also directly smashed Yi Zhenmo. Although it was only a wisp of his soul, in his opinion, it was already very difficult. However, this is only a wisp of his soul. You must remember not to be arrogant. If you see his real body in the future, it's better to immediately take a detour. Otherwise, there will be big trouble, Yi Zhentian said. Yes. Yi Shiwen nodded in agreement. He was not an ungrateful blade. Hey, I originally wanted you to participate in the next Imperial Court struggle, but I didn't think that you would actually come out, so I didn't report your name. Our Yi family has a great influence in the Imperial Court, so our Yi family's disciples naturally don't need to go through layers of selection like those individual cultivators. Our disciples can directly enter the Imperial Court struggle, but now you have to go through layers of selection like those individual cultivators. Only then can you have a chance to compete with the Heaven's Pride experts of the major forces. Yi Zhentian sighed and said. Yi Shiwen remained calm and collected. These things were all within his expectations. Yi family was one of the richest families in the Imperial Court. It was natural for them to have some privileges, although this was unfair to those individual cultivators. But there was no such thing as fairness in this world. Hey, I won't delay your time. Since you have already decided to participate, then you should hurry up so that you won't be late, Yi Zhentian said. Yes, then this disciple will take his leave. Yi Shiwen said goodbye to Yi Zhentian and immediately prepared to set off for the Imperial Court. Chapter 1477. The Yi clan was located in Mount Qi, the core area of all human forces. Mount Qi was very vast, and apart from the Yi clan, there were several other powerful forces stationed here. However, the royal court was different. The royal court wasn't on the ancient Barrens continent, but hung high above the 9 heavens. It was a colossus formed by countless independent small worlds. The royal court that hung high above the 9th heaven not only showed its lofty status, but it also meant that it had to bear the greatest risk from the outside world, shielding the entire human race from wind and rain. Just like the Yi clan, the place where the royal court was located was also suppressing a huge crack with the demon realm. No one knew which powerful demon had torn it open in the past, but it still could not be completely repaired. It could only be considered a suppression. The royal court was built here mostly to suppress this largest passage to the demon realm among the human race. Yi Shiwen flew all the way up. The 9 heavens where the royal court was located was also a special space. If Yi Shiwen flew like this, he would have already flown out of the atmosphere and entered the endless starry sky. But now, after flying for 3 days and 3 nights, he finally saw what the royal court looked like. There were endless palaces that stretched on endlessly. Tens of thousands of golden lights rolled red, and thousands of auspicious auras spewed out purple mist. The palaces were dark green and made of colored glass. They were bright, and there were several large pillars in the inner walls. Golden-scaled, dazzling sun scarlet-bearded dragons coiled around the pillars. There were also several long bridges with colorful red-crowned phoenixes hovering in the sky. Yi Shiwen could feel a strong burst of spirit energy blowing against his face as he approached. It was an extremely pure spirit energy. Just taking a breath of it would make one feel as if all the bones in his body had been opened. Cultivating in this place was several times faster than cultivating in the ordinary places of the ancient wilderness. The closer he got to the royal court, the stronger the aura became. However, as he continued to fly upwards, he discovered that there were countless astral winds densely surrounding the royal court. These astral winds were extremely terrifying, and even a heaven realm expert would be blown to pieces by these astral winds. Not to mention, there were also countless thunder dragons roaming about, engulfing anyone who dared to rush in. It could be said that the defense was very tight. Not to mention ordinary heaven realm experts. Even heaven realm experts would be heavily injured if they came in. If they were not careful, they would die. Only a tyrant body like Yi Shiwen could endure for a long time in this endless astral wind. It was even more terrifying than the chaos. Fortunately, Yi Shiwen had obtained the map of the Yi family's internal treasures and the information of the royal court before he came here. So, he wasn't as ignorant as before. In order to prevent internal and external enemies, the experts of the royal court had set up layers of defensive measures. Even if the enemy's army attacked at the same time, it would be difficult to break through the royal court's defenses. There were only a few passageways left for people to enter and exit, and only those passageways could allow people to enter and exit. Yi Shiwen quickly arrived at one of the passages according to the map. It was different from the previous passage where there were no signs of human habitation. Countless tyrannical auras were lurking in the vicinity of this passage. On the three sides of the passage, there were powerful astral winds and endless thunder and lightning, engulfing all enemies who dared to enter. Inside the passage, at this time, many young experts had already rushed over. Many of them had already entered the passage, and many of them had also settled down in the cities around the passage. Yi Shiwen had unfolded his devil wings and had flown for a full 3 days and 3 nights, so one could well imagine how far this imperial court was. Some people had been flying for a month in a row, while also fighting against the astral winds at high altitudes. Just flying to the vicinity of this place had almost exhausted their Zhen Yuan, and some people had already exhausted their Zhen Yuan halfway through their journey, and had relied on swallowing some dawn to barely support themselves until here. So, they had no choice but to settle down in a nearby city. Although this city was called a city, it was almost equivalent to a small continent, and there were hundreds of millions of human commoners living in it. Although the royal court competition was open to all loose cultivators, as long as they were under 800 years old, all loose cultivators could sign up. But in reality, it was different from the descendants of the rich and powerful clans who could directly use the clan's transmission array to come here. They had to fly here by themselves. This was actually also a test. Although many human elites under 800 years old could sign up, but in reality, not everyone could come. Otherwise, just the number of people would be too much for the royal court to handle. Although some people relied on swallowing medicinal pills to fly to the royal court, but in reality, there were even more people who could not fly up even after swallowing medicinal pills. Because the higher they went, the greater the consumption. They also had to fight against the astral winds, and there were also many powerful demonic beasts living in the sky. Just these were layers upon layers of obstacles. Not even half of the people could truly reach the royal court. This was the so-called great waves washing away the sand. In silence, the first wave of screening had already been completed. So far, those who could reach the royal court were not Heaven Realm warriors, but invincible masters among half-step Heaven Realm warriors. There would always be some geniuses in the world. Even if they were half-step Heaven Realm warriors, they could still fight against Heaven Realm warriors. Yi Shiwen was definitely not the only one. On top of the city walls, there stood tyrannical soldiers. Although they were only soldiers, but each figure was extremely frightening, and they were all at the level of Heaven Realm or above. The royal court was rich and overbearing, and the depth of their foundation was enough to scare people to death. Many geniuses who had just arrived from various places almost fainted from depression when they saw this scene. They were also geniuses in various places and were praised by the elders of their sections. Many of them were called the hope of their sections. Although they were all called loose cultivators did not mean that they did not have a sect. After all, those who were alone were in the minority. Most of the loose cultivators still had sects, and some sects even had tens of thousands of people, as many as hundreds of thousands of people. But compared to Yi Clan, which had hundreds of millions of direct family members, it was nothing at all, and they were all demoted to loose cultivators. However, in this city, any random soldier was at the celestial tier or above, which was a great blow to their confidence. Moreover, every single one of those soldiers was giving off a powerful aura. They were not flowers raised in a greenhouse. On the contrary, every single one of them seemed to have grown up from a battlefield filled with blood and fire. Many of them might not have killed as many people in their entire lives as the soldiers here killed in a year. Every one of these soldiers had a monstrous, murderous aura. If it were not for the constant operation of the Matrix in this city, dispelling this monstrous, murderous aura, this place would very soon become an Azura ghost town. Although those who could cultivate to this point and fly here were all geniuses from all over the world, and their minds could be said to be firm, but when they saw these extremely tyrannical killing gods, they still felt a chill on their backs. The soldiers on the city wall were like statues, and they did not even look at these people. They had no emotions, no compliments, no mockery, only coldness. And this was actually the most frightening thing. However, Yi Shiwen knew that these soldiers were probably the most elite force in the royal court because this was the first line of defense to surround and protect this passage. Once there was a change in the royal court, these people would rush to the front line. Every once in a while, these soldiers would be replaced, and the replaced soldiers were none other than the elite soldiers directly mobilized from the human-demon battlefield. If these soldiers were in other troops, they would definitely be high-level officers and could even control an ordinary army. However, here they were just ordinary soldiers, and such elite soldiers were not everywhere in the royal court. Most of the troops here were just a little stronger than the Tau legions of other forces. If this was just an ordinary army, then the royal court could really unify the world for thousands of years. After entering the city, one could find that it was quite prosperous. The city was very busy, and there were all kinds of shops on both sides of the street. Although this was the first line of defense for the royal court, in fact, there were still many ordinary people living here. They might be the descendants of some big shots in the royal court, and they could not enter the royal court to serve, so they became ordinary people living here. Of course, although they were ordinary people, in fact, their strength was much more powerful than many ordinary people. Because this city had been under the rule of the royal court for a long time, it had not changed for millions of years. On the city walls, on the buildings, there had already been many imprints of time. The people who came and went here wore many ancient clothes. Suddenly, it was as if they had returned to the ancient times. In a tea house, Yi Shiwen sat on a seat, quietly drinking tea. It was rare for his heart to be so calm. In the past 10 years, especially in the past 2 years, almost every moment was either killing or plotting to kill. There was not a moment of peace in his heart. If it was an ordinary person, without the enlightening mind ancient tree to stabilize his mind, he would have already gone crazy at this time. Therefore, he especially enjoyed this rare peace, and his ears were full of the discussions of the surrounding tea guests. Recently, a lot of young masters have come to the city. To be honest, I have never seen so many young masters. Do our human race really have so many young masters? What's wrong with that? Every time there's a royal court struggle, many young experts will come. You're still young, you'll get used to it after experiencing it a few more times. Furthermore, these so-called young experts are just rogue cultivators. The true experts are still nurtured by our royal court itself. The other royal families and marquee clans aren't a match for our heavenly court's local experts. Then what are these people doing here? Are they here to serve as foils for our royal court's geniuses? Of course not. Our royal court's masters will not participate in this royal court struggle. Otherwise, there will be no day for them to stand out. The purpose of the royal court struggle is to select geniuses for the royal court and to absorb new blood. This is the original purpose. The world is big, and there are countless geniuses in our race. Many of them are not weaker than our royal court's heaven's pride experts. However, they have not received the best training, otherwise, they would be able to stand shoulder to shoulder with our royal court's geniuses. Chapter 1478. Yi Shiwen was silent. This was the truth. Huang Wuji was extremely talented and wasn't inferior to the many geniuses that Yi Shiwen knew. However, his achievements were limited in the true martial domain. He was probably still in the transcendent realm and couldn't be compared to the current Yi Shiwen. A person's achievements didn't just depend on talent. It also depended on one's will and how big one's platform was. If Yi Shiwen remained in the true martial domain, his achievements would probably stop at the transcendent realm, and he wouldn't be as glorious as he was today. As such, the purpose of the Royal Court contest is to select them and have them receive the best training from Royal Court. Finally, they will be absorbed into Royal Court and contribute their strength to the rise of humanity. Even if it's the royal family or the Marquis clan, they can't compare to Royal Court. The surrounding customers nodded their heads. They were all natives of the city and had their own pride and confidence. Even if Royal Court was no longer glorious, it was still a colossus that surpassed all human forces. The royal family, the Marquis clan, and the loose cultivators couldn't compete with Royal Court. In fact, many of the royal family and Marquis clan's patriarchs held positions in Royal Court and held great power. The royal family and Marquis clan were the descendants of the Marquis clan or sects formed when Royal Court was at its peak and ruled the world. There were the so-called 4 royal families and 28 Marquis clans. These 32 forces formed the pinnacle of the human race. The rest, in the eyes of others, were the range of loose cultivators and couldn't be considered as having a truly powerful inheritance. Be it the Yi family or the Wang family, they were all powerful clans that were listed on the Marquis clan list. Those that were listed on the Marquis clan list were naturally different from the loose cultivators. Other sects or clans, no matter how large they were, as long as they weren't listed on the Marquis clan list, they wouldn't be recognized by others. These natives of Royal Court didn't even care about the royal family and Marquis clan, let alone the loose cultivators. They probably didn't care about them at all. It's mainly because the geniuses of the royal family and Marquis clan might stand out. Although there are some talented ones among the loose cultivators, the resources they can obtain are too little. These tea guests were more optimistic about the geniuses of the royal clans and the Marquis clans. As for the rogue cultivators, although there would occasionally be some stunning ones, the overall scale was incomparable. Originally, the imperial court struggle was just a selection process between the royal families and the Marquis clans. But later, because of the protests of some rogue cultivator patriarchs, it was opened up to rogue cultivators, giving them a chance. After all, although these rogue cultivators were not very strong, 90% of the martial artists in the world were rogue cultivators. These people's words could not be ignored. This was also a kind of compromise. No one could monopolize all the benefits. Senior brother, look at them. They're going overboard. It's as if we're only here to serve as a foil. At this moment, on another table, there was a cute little girl who looked about 14 or 15 years old. At this moment, she pouted and said with dissatisfaction. Beside her, there were 2 other men. One looked to be in his 30s and was extraordinarily handsome, while the other looked much younger, in his early 20s. Yi Shiwen saw that this little girl was talking about fun and could not help but smile. The strength of these 3 people could not be said to be weak. Among them, the young man in his 30s was actually at the 3rd level of the heaven realm. The young man in his 20s was also at the 2nd level of the heaven realm. Even the youngest girl, who looked like a little girl, had just entered the heaven realm. In the face of the little lowly's complaints, the young man in his 30s couldn't help but smile bitterly and said, although what they said is cold, it is also a fact, especially you. Master has always told you to cultivate well, but look at you. Halfway through, your Jinyuan ran out and you almost fell down. If it wasn't for me and junior brother Lu supporting you, I'm afraid you would have fallen down. Falling from such a high altitude, even a heaven-tier elite would instantly be smashed to pieces. Who asked this imperial court to be so high? I have already entered the heaven realm, but I can't even fly up, she said with a rather gloomy pout. This showed how much of a blow this matter had dealt to her. Even among the marquis and royal clans, heaven realm experts were extremely high status, and in some loose cultivator sects, heaven realm experts could be said to be at the level of the grand elders. Now that she could not fly to the imperial court, this was a huge blow to her confidence. In reality, there were many people who could not fly to the imperial court, but heaven realm experts who could not fly to the imperial court were still relatively few. It could be seen that this little girl's level was more or less a noob. But it doesn't matter. Once we enter the 10th world, we will immediately break through the world barrier and rush to the first few worlds. This little girl immediately became spirited, as if she had found the feeling in an instant. I heard that there are not so many people in the first few worlds. Although the imperial court struggle was said to be held together, it was actually held in 10 connected worlds. The 4 great royal clans occupied worlds number 2, 3, 4, and 5 respectively, while the remaining 28 great marquis clans occupied worlds number 6, 7, 8, and 9. Finally, all the loose cultivators gathered in world number 10. They fought all the way until they finally gathered in world number 1 in the center to fight for the final ranking. From this arrangement, it could be seen that the more powerful the forces, the greater the privileges. The 4 great royal clans occupied 4 worlds, while the remaining 28 great marquis clans occupied 4 worlds in total. As for the remaining loose cultivators, they only had a quota for 1 world. There were a total of 10 rankings in each world, and in the end, a total of 100 rankings would be contested. These 100 people would be absorbed into the imperial court and nurtured with all their might. However, it did not mean that these 10 worlds were fixed. People from different worlds could completely break through the world barrier and enter other worlds to fight for rankings. For example, the 10th world was a world where loose cultivators gathered. Similarly, the competition there was more intense, and there would also be experts from other worlds crossing over. In the end, there were not many spots that would fall into the hands of loose cultivators, and there were even a few cases where the loose cultivators were completely wiped out. There was nothing the loose cultivators could do about this. They were given a chance, but if they could not defeat those people, what else could they do? Ha ha ha, I'm dying of laughter. Did you hear that? These people actually want to fight their way into other worlds. Ha, I'm dying of laughter. At this time, a sudden burst of laughter came from another table. Yi Shiwen turned his head and saw a table full of 5 or 6 young people. Each of them was dressed in gorgeous clothes, had an extraordinary bearing, and had high cultivation. However, at this time, they were laughing so hard that they were out of breath. What are you laughing at? That little girl suddenly said angrily. I'm laughing at you for overestimating yourselves. Do you know how strong the world barrier is? Without the 4th heavenly layer of celestial realm, you want to break through the world barrier? Isn't that just a pipe dream? Moreover, so what if you break through the world barrier? Can you compete with those rich and powerful clans? A young man sitting on a seat said with a sneer. This little girl suddenly became so angry that she did not know what to say. What he said was indeed the truth. Although there were fewer people in other worlds, the competition was more brutal. Those who came from the rich and powerful clans were generally stronger than these loose cultivators. However, his tone made people uncomfortable. Summer insects cannot talk about ice. What is there to say to them? At this time, a purple-robed young man curled his lips and said. His eyes were slender and slightly cold, making people feel that it was difficult to approach him. Yes, young Master Xiang is right. At this time, the young man from before could not help but hastily nod and say. It seemed that he was rather in awe of this purple-robed young man. Looking at his aloof appearance and that bearing, it was obvious that he was not a loose cultivator. He was probably from a royal or marquis clan. Don't think that I don't know that you are also from a marquis clan or a royal family. However, you have no way to compete with them. That's why you came here, to pick up the leftovers. Isn't that right? That little girl said in a shocking manner. Green snail. At this moment, the 30-year-old senior hastily berated them. It wasn't an easy task for them to fight against the temperamental Ho clans and Heaven's prides of the royal clans. If their strength was truly outstanding, then so be it. However, that wasn't the case. If they were to offend these people, then it would undoubtedly be a huge problem. Unfortunately, the words of the little Lolita had poked at his sore spot. This matter was not a big deal, but it was not a glorious thing. These Heaven's chosen ones, regardless of whether they were rogue cultivators or from rich and powerful families, which one of them was not arrogant and unruly? Heaven was the boss, the earth was the second, and they were the third. They did not expose people's shortcomings, and they did not hit people's faces. This little girl's words immediately made him think of the humiliation of coming to the 10th district to avoid those geniuses. He immediately became angry. You don't know the immensity of heaven and earth. The purple-robed young man was instantly enraged. He immediately slapped his palm. It turned into a streak of light and almost instantly slapped towards the little girl's face. Even the 30-year-old young man did not have time to react. Just as the palm was about to land on the little girl's face, suddenly, a ray of light directly flashed by and a shrill, piercing sound rang out. The purple-robed young man immediately reacted. His expression changed, and he hurriedly retracted his large hand. There was a loud buzzing sound. On the wall, a chopstick directly sank into a small part of the wall. The end of the chopstick was still constantly swaying, making a buzzing sound. You're tuning into the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.